Hello everybody, welcome back to another very long episode of The Casual Criminalist. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach Killer. Alright, I've never heard of this one, but it's extremely lengthy. 17,000 words it says at the top here. Alrighty then, thank you to Chris, who wrote it. Shout out, let's jump in. Oh, by the way, the format of the show, if you're new here, I say it every time, but just in case. I've never read this before, Chris writes it, I read it, we'll explore together. Let's go. I've recently read, I think, 2 or 3 untold ones in a row, so I'm looking forward to some satisfying conclusion here, where Rex goes to prison forever, maybe gets the chair. Let's find out. I feel like Gilgo might be in Australia, though, so maybe he's not going to get the chair. But if it's in America, yeehaw, you never know. In the early hours of May the 1st, 2010, retired insurance fraud investigator Gus Calotti was standing in his bathroom, shaving, when a sudden pounding at his front door ruptured the tranquility of his morning routine. FBI, open up! He was definitely not expecting anyone at 5:15 a.m. After all, he lived in Oak Beach, a tiny gated community on the south shore of Long Island. With the Atlantic on one side and a tangle of brackish marshland on the other, it consisted of a single road in and just 72 houses. It's about as isolated as you can get, while still being just 40 miles from Manhattan. Whoa! Cool. Gus opened the door. Sounds nice. Gus opened the door. The sun was not up yet, but before him, he could see a wild-eyed 24-year-old woman standing barefoot on his porch. "Help me," she screamed. "Help me, help me." Gus tried to calm the woman down and asked her what was wrong, but she couldn't answer. She just kept screaming. Finally, he took out his phone and called 911. Wait, when was this happening? Oh, 2010. So yeah, definitely got phones and shit. Then he told her to sit down. The police were on their way. The terrified woman stared at him for a moment before turning around and running straight back out into the darkness. What? Her name was Shannon Gilbert, and she was never seen alive again. Oh my god, what? 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 Now, as we spend this episode shedding light on the victims of the Gilgo Beach Killer, I want you to remember Shannon and that image. A young woman on a stranger's porch at 5 a.m, begging for help. We'll come back to her and remember her story as well, but first, we have to dive into the sequence of events that she set into motion. You see, Shannon Gilbert did not prompt police to start hunting a serial killer at all. Rather, she sparked a missing persons case. Suffolk County spent months looking for her, and in December 2010, 7 months later, a canine officer and his dog were searching an area along Ocean Parkway, about 1.5 miles from where she was last seen. Suddenly, the dog stopped and alerted. He'd found something, but it wasn't Shannon Gilbert. It was a young woman named Melissa Bartholomew, wrapped in burlap. She'd been missing for 17 months. Over the next 48 hours, the police uncovered 3 more bodies, to total the 4 women widely known as the Gilgo Four. By the next spring, they'd found 6 more. Over the following decade, the list continued to grow, but for 13 years, nobody from the FBI to the New York State Police to the Suffolk County Police Department could find their killer. He killed 10 people. Goddamn, at least. It took a task force starting from scratch, and a clue in the form of a discarded pizza box of all things, to finally catch him. His name is Rex Heuermann, and he's become infamous as the Gilgo Beach Killer. When Melissa Barthelmew's body was found, he was seemingly an average guy. A licensed New York architect, a father, a commuter from Long Island into Manhattan. He ate lunch at his desk and spent his day arguing about zoning permits. He lived in a rundown but otherwise inconspicuous house in the quiet suburban town of Massapequa Park, about 20 minutes from Gilgo Beach. Bro. He's just hiding it. He's just... oh my god, like an architect, father, commuter? Dude. But the inside of that house told a wildly different story, one whose props include 279 weapons and a hard drive with a Word document reading in all caps, "Problems." Its first entry, DNA. Just a few weeks ago, Rex Heuermann stood up in a courtroom in Riverhead, New York, looked straight at the judge, and uttered guilty 8 separate times. 8 women, at least. 17 years. It was the end of one of the longest and arguably most botched serial killer investigations in modern American history. Okay, we're in America. Sorry, I mentioned at the beginning it sounded Australian. Maybe that's just because of the beach thing. But I get the feeling because this guy has pled guilty, and it's 2010, he's not going to get the chair. Or whenever this was. It wasn't 2010, it was a lot later, right? Today, we're going to talk about Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach Killer. Gilgo Beach, where bodies disappear. Understanding the geography of Gilgo Beach is essential to understanding the case, specifically why it took so long to find the bodies. There's the marshland, right? Didn't we just talk about marshland? At over 100 miles long, Long Island is the most populous island in the United States. It juts out east into the Atlantic Ocean from New York City. Crucially, along its south coast, known as the South Shore, there's a chain of narrow barrier islands running parallel to the mainland. While the most well-known islands, like Fire Islands, can reach up to a mile wide, some are only a few hundred feet wide. One of the largest is Jones Beach Island at around 15 miles long and just over a mile wide. From one end to the other runs Ocean Parkway, one of the most scenic and pleasant drives in the northeast. To the south, you pass Gilgo Beach, where you see the grand expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, while to the north the waters of the Great South Bay ripple towards Long Island. And on a clear day, you can even see the Manhattan skyline in the distance. 6 million people visit Jones Beach State Park at the western end of the island each year, making it the most heavily visited beach on the entire East Coast. But mostly in the summer. In the winter, things are different. Ocean Parkway goes dark, and I don't mean that metaphorically. There are virtually no street lamps for long stretches of the road. Meanwhile, it cuts through low dunes and thick bush formed by scrub pine, beach grass, and reeds that can grow up to 12 feet high. Yeah, this is a real good place to hide a body for it to decompose. In the words of Suffolk County Police Department, one cannot tell where the highway is or where the bay is. Long stretches are totally void of houses, businesses, and even a shoulder. The pavement abruptly ends in the brush. Yet it's hardly remote. I mean, as I said, you could see the New York skyline. It's just 40 miles from Times Square. You could have dinner in Midtown, pay your bill, get in your car, and be driving along Gilgo Beach on Ocean Parkway in under an hour. This paradox is precisely what makes it appealing for a killer. It's empty and desolate when he needs it to be, yet crowded enough that a stranger passing through is invisible. Millions of cars pass by each year, but just 20 feet off the pavement, a body can remain undiscovered for a decade. And, well, that's precisely what happened. Carefully chosen victims. Now, we will of course give full attention to all of Rex Heuermann's victims, but first you should understand what they all had in common, and why it makes our perpetrators' crimes particularly cowardly. Every single victim of the Gilgo Beach Killer worked at some point in the sex trade, with the exception of Sandra Castilla, for whom too little is known to say accurately. Moreover, most of them advertise via Craigslist or Backpage, highly unregulated, unmonitored, and underground marketplaces for paid companionship. Several of his victims struggled with substance abuse, and many were mothers. Some had even been reported missing in the past, and the relevant authorities had not put much effort into finding them either. More disturbingly, most of the victims were extremely petite, with several under 5 feet tall, that's about 150 centimeters. This is no coincidence. In that Word document I mentioned, Rex Heuermann also wrote the words, "Small is good," under a list of preferences for targeting. He chose women who would have a hard time fighting back and whose disappearances could be explained away by drugs, transience, or their choice of profession. Just one of many examples. In 2017, when Maureen Brainerd Barnes didn't come home after a trip into Manhattan, her friend, Sarah Carnes, called the police. Yet they didn't treat her as a missing person, they just treated her as someone who hadn't come home yet. Similarly, in 2009, when Melissa Barthelme's teenage sister Amanda started receiving taunting phone calls from an anonymous man using Melissa's cell phone, including one where the caller explicitly said, "I killed Melissa," police went to trace the calls. They pinpointed calls to Midtown Manhattan, Madison Square Gardens, and Massapequa. And then they just stopped there for more than a decade. They're like, "Ooh, that's interesting. Let's focus on another case." All of these women were daughters. Some of them were mothers. Maureen Brainerd Barnes had a 7-year-old daughter named Nicolette. Megan Waterman had a 3-year-old daughter whom she called every night. Amber Lynn Costello had a sister. Melissa Barthelme had just finished cosmetology school. They were all people. Yet Rex Heuermann believed that their engagement in sex work at places on society's margins meant that they didn't count enough to find. Sadly, the system proved him right for far too long. Suffolk County Police. You might say it's easy to play armchair detective and criticize the cops in hindsight, but this is one case where anyone can see that it was spectacularly botched. The Gilgo Beach murders fell under the jurisdiction of Suffolk County Police Department, which is one of the largest suburban police departments in the United States. In 2012, while bodies were still being identified from the original discoveries along Ocean Parkway, the Suffolk County Police Chief was James Burke, and one of James Burke's first acts in office was to start trying to kick the FBI out of the Gilgo Beach investigation. Keep in mind that the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit is widely considered the best serial killer investigative resource on the planet, so one has to question why he would be starting to block them out of a serial killer investigation, but this would become clear as the case moved forward. Alright, I do wonder. Gotta have a bloody good reason, mate. In the meantime, there are some things you should know about James Burke. For one thing, he was, in 2016, convicted in federal court on civil rights and conspiracy charges because he beat a man named Christopher Loeb while he was handcuffed in police custody. Loeb had allegedly broken into Burke's unlocked motor vehicle and stolen a duffel bag that contained, and I kid you not, a bunch of sex toys. This is a wild story. But get this, in 1995, years prior to his promotion to chief, the Suffolk County Police Department found that Burke had, quote, had a relationship with a woman engaged in prostitution and drug dealing. I guess that could be technically a relationship, a transactional relationship. Once more, he engaged in sex acts in police vehicles while on duty and in uniform. Bruh, you made it to chief? How you become chief of the police after that is beyond me. Chris and I, same page. Well, anyway, James Burke wasn't the only source of corruption at the top either. His boss, during the beginning of the Gilgo Beach investigation, was then Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spotter. He and his top corruption prosecutor, Christopher McPartland, were convicted along with Burke for helping cover up the assault on Christopher Loeb. Wow, the corruption prosecutor? Seriously? So basically, the people running the investigation from 2012 through 2015 were men who would later become convicted felons. Interesting. Finally, after Burke resigned in October 2015 amid the federal probe, the FBI came back on the case. Some 5 years had passed since the discovery of the Gilgo 4, the original bodies found off Ocean Parkway. That's a long time for forensic material, witness memory, and phone records to all degrade and get lost. Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach Killer. To get to know the Gilgo Beach Killer, we have to take a quick 20-minute detour across the bay to a small incorporated village on Long Island proper, known as Massapequa Park. With just about 17,000 residents currently, it's about as suburban as you can get. The median household income is about $170,000. A household, so 2 owners. Still, that's a lot. You gotta remember, America's rich, bro. Like $170K? God damn. And the poverty rate is under 5%. Most significantly, Massapequa Park is safe. The crime rate is 61% lower than the national average. Your chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime is just 1 in 629. Wait, is that good? I don't like the thought that my chance of becoming a victim of violent crime is 1 in 629. That feels way too high. And is that per year? Its county, Nassau County, was ranked the number 1 safest county in the United States. Okay. Guess it is pretty safe. I guess even for America, even for globally, that's got to be pretty safe, right? If it's the safest place in America. I know America's not the safest place in the world, but that's got to be pretty safe. Yet it also became home to a serial killer. Rex Andrew Heuermann was born in Massapequa Park on September 13th, 1963. His father, Theodore Heuermann, was a World War II veteran, a former second lieutenant in the US Air Force, and a childhood acquaintance claimed it was common knowledge that Rex had a poor relationship with his dad, before the man passed away when the boy was just 12. Rex's relationship is said to have been much closer with his mother, Dolores Heuermann. After Ted died in 1975, she was left to care for Rex and his 4 siblings. Many childhood acquaintances described Rex as a mama's boy, and they described that mama as controlling. A high school classmate claimed he would often say things like, "I have to get back to my mother," and would describe her as his universe. Allegedly, he talked a lot about his mum, but never mentioned his late father. That silence says something, doesn't it? In fact, criminologist Scott Bonn, who had profiled the Gilgo Beach Killer long before they ever caught Rex Heuermann, specifically used the term emotionally incestuous when describing his relationship with his mother. He believes that this may have contributed to Heuermann's pathology. Yeah, I don't know why, but it's he's just like, hello, mother. Feels like very serial killer-y, doesn't it? Yet his home life was not the only thing that may have led Rex Heuermann down a dark path in another life. Another former classmate described him as everybody's punching bag in middle school and someone who got picked on a lot. The classmate described watching a group of students try to beat up Rex in 6th grade and continue to verbally torment him even after a teacher intervened. The classmate went on to say that Rex was pushed to his limit. He ultimately became a loner with a mean streak. "I was really scared of him," the classmate continued. "He was the type of guy, if he snapped, he could really hurt you." Despite the bullying, Rex Heuermann was at least successful enough academically to graduate Berner High School in 1981, after which he attended the New York Institute of Technology to study architecture. By 1987, he was working at a Manhattan firm, and he got his architect's license in 1996. Yeah, okay, I mean, the architect's pretty smart. Rex married his first wife, Elizabeth Rahn, in 1990, but the marriage ended swiftly just the next year. She has never spoken publicly, and it remains unclear why they separated so quickly. Rex went on to marry his second wife, Asa Ellerup, in 1996, and they had a daughter, Victoria, together later that year. Asa also had a son, Christopher, with developmental disabilities from a previous relationship, who Rex raised as a stepson. I would say good guy Rex, but obviously fucking not. When Rex Heuermann was finally arrested in 2023, he and Asa were still together, and his family has generally only had positive things to say about him as a husband and father. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Yeah, because he's leading a crazy-ass double life. He's like architect, buttoned-up family man, and then he's like, "I also murder sex workers." Jesus Christ, Rex, you f***ing psycho. An important moment in his life was when Rex Heuermann bought the house he'd grown up in for his mother for $170,000 in 1994, and that is where he was living when the murders occurred. We'll explore that house in some detail. Strangely, there seems to be no record of whether his mother, who was 93 years old and still alive at the time of his arrest, remained living in the house when he bought it. I mean, probably. He does love his mummy. Either way, Rex Heuermann lived in the very house he grew up in Massapequa, just minutes from where the bodies were dropped, for 29 years. Neighbors described him as quiet and insisted he kept to himself. "At night, you could hear a pin drop," one said. Paradoxically, though, he was very physically hard to miss. In fact, he was huge, a hulking 6'4", 193 centimeters, goddamn, and over 240 pounds, 110 kilos. With broad shoulders, this physical enormity makes his childhood bullying all the more poignant and makes his deliberate choice of small women all the more revolting. Indeed it does. That guy is massive. I guess he wasn't so massive in school because he got bullied, and then he got massive. Finally, one very important detail about Rex Heuermann's life in Massapequa. He drove a dark, green, first-generation Chevy Avalanche. Not a super conspicuous car, but not the most common vehicle on Long Island either. No idea what a Chevy Avalanche is, especially a first generation. Shall I be familiar with a second generation, Chris? So we see a real mix of things. In some ways, Rex Heuermann seemed like a really normal guy living a really normal life. Not the first person you'd expect to commit these crimes. On the other hand, there were some things that stood out. Some things that should have stood out to police if they were utilizing, the FBI's profiling team. Right, which was fully available to them. What the fuck? And most of all, he was right there. During all the killings, while police were looking for the missing women, or should have been, when the victims' bodies were finally discovered, and as the investigation crept on and was stalled and fumbled, Rex Heuermann was just minutes away typing up some pretty disturbing Word documents in the very house he grew up in. The victims. Who they were. Now, before we get into the case itself and the investigation, I do want to spend some time with the women that Rex Heuermann murdered. 8 women, 17 years. We'll go over them chronologically, based on the date it happened, so you can get a sense of the persistent disappearance of women that plagues Long Island, right in plain sight, while no one noticed. I'm not going to go too deep into the matter of their deaths, but I will clarify that they were all killed by strangulation. Rex Heuermann himself confirmed that 8 separate times in court on April the 8th, 2026. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you who they were before he preyed on them. Sandra Costilla, 1993. In 1993, Sandra Costilla, who was originally from Trinidad and Tobago, was 28 years old and living in New York City. As far as anyone knows, and Rex Heuermann has admitted, she was the Gilgo Beach Killer's first victim. Unfortunately, unlike later victims, very little else is known about her. Costilla disappeared on or about November 19th or 20th, 1993. In this case, her body was actually discovered relatively quickly after just a few days, but not by the police searching for her or anything like that. Rather, a group of hunters came across her in a wooded area near Southampton. This was about 60 miles from where the bodies at Gilgo Beach would be discovered 17 years later. For 31 years, no one connected her to the others. In fact, for a while the police's main suspect was a different serial killer named John Bittrolf, who was convicted in 2017 of 2 other murders in Suffolk County. Then in 2024, hairs recovered from her body were retested with modern forensic methods and matched to Rex Heuermann. This was actually a bombshell for the case, as it dramatically shifted the timeline. Before that, the police had believed that the murders began around 2007, but this pushed the start date at least 14 years earlier. Karen Vergata, 1996. In 1996, Karen Vergata was 34 years old and living in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of Manhattan. At the time, she was working as an escort and battling severe addiction. She was a mother to 2 sons, but due to her struggles, they had been removed by child welfare services and adopted out in 1992. The last time anyone in Karen's family heard from her was Valentine's Day 1996. It was also her father, Dominic's birthday, and she made sure to call him, even though she was in jail at the time. Her bond with her father was so close that when she disappeared, he tried filing a missing persons report with the NYPD. In a pattern all too obvious in this case, he was turned away. The police would be like, come on, she's just a sex worker. She's probably been murdered. No one cares. Oh, God. Undeterred, he hired a private investigator and eventually filed to have her legally declared dead in an attempt to find some closure. For 26 years, Dominic Vergata did not know what happened to his daughter. Sadly, she had somehow encountered Rex Heuermann in April 1996 and he had killed her, the same month that he married Asa Ellerup. A few weeks later, 2 brothers, looking for driftwood, discovered her partial remains inside a garbage bag on Fire Island, the Barrier Island, just east of Jones Beach Island. However, authorities could not identify her, not then, not when more remains were found in 2011 off Ocean Parkway after the discovery of the Gilgo 4. She was only known as Jane Doe No. 7, or Fire Island Jane Doe. Finally, in 2022, the police were able to use genetic genealogy to determine Fire Island Jane Doe was Karen Vergata. A painstaking, investigative tactic, genetic genealogy cross-references the victim's DNA with large genetic databases to find a relative, usually a distant cousin. Then law enforcement uses public records like obituaries, birth records, and census data to build that relative's family tree until they find a common ancestor. I had a sponsor at Ancestry DNA, ages ago, and I got access to their, their family tree builder. That is remarkably addictive. You'll be like, oh yeah, no, I'll just find another connection. Oh wow, this guy here. And then you're like, that's my great-great-great-great-great-grandmummy. That's my great-great-great-great-grandpappy. I would like to do this job. I would find that quite interesting. They then build it forward until they find a descendant fitting the profile of the victim. 4 years later, Rex Heuermann confessed in open court to murdering Karen Vergata. However, he did this as part of a plea deal where, if he admitted to killing her, he would not be officially indicted for the crime. Okay, therefore she holds the unique position of being the only one of the Gilgo Beach Killer's 8 known victims he was never formally charged with killing. Wait, even though he said he killed her? Okay. What's the benefit of that? He's going to prison forever. Unfortunately, Karen's loving father did not live to see this modicum of justice. After her remains were finally identified, authorities privately informed Dominic Vergata, 87 at the time. He passed away just 2 months later, never hearing Heuermann's confession. As for her sons, they reportedly learned of their biological mother's tragic fate from a public press conference. Not only did Rex Heuermann steal their mother from them, but he relegated her to a cold case in the back of a file cabinet somewhere for decades of the boys' lives. Yeah, because Rex Heuermann, as we have well established, is a massive piece of shit. Valerie Mack, 2000. In 2000, Valerie Mack was 24 years old. She was living in Philadelphia and working as an escort under the alias Melissa Taylor, but she'd spent most of her life in Port Republic, New Jersey, where she'd been raised in foster care. She'd been arrested several times for sex work-related offences. When Mack disappeared, she had a 6-year-old son named Benjamin Torres. She was last seen around Port Republic in the spring of 2000, but no one ever filed a missing persons report for her. She simply fell through the cracks. Like Karen Vergata, her body was found relatively soon after she was murdered, but no one could figure out who she was. 3 hunters in Manorville, Long Island, which lies about 40 miles east of Massapequa Park, found a black plastic bag containing some of her remains in the woods. The rest of her victims were similarly found along Ocean Parkway in April 2011, linking her to the Gilgo Beach killings. And also, like Karen Vergata, she remains unidentified for decades. She was merely known as Jane Doe No. 6 or Manorville Jane Doe. Police once again used a sample of her DNA and investigative genetic genealogy to give her name back to her in May 2020. Yet her son was forced to grow up, not only without a mother, but without any knowledge of where she was or what happened to her. He was 26 when she was finally identified, and in his 30s when Rex Heuermann finally stood up in court and pleaded guilty to a murder. Benjamin has consequently been an active voice in seeking justice for his mother. Just a few weeks before recording this, he filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Rex Heuermann and his immediate family. In addition to claiming that they'd been profiting from his mother's murder, he asserts that Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, and daughter Victoria knew, or at least should have known, what was happening right under their noses. We don't know much about the family, but that does seem a bit much. This guy seems to have been very much double-lifing it. However, for them to profit off the crimes, that feels like that shouldn't be allowed, right? Of course, Victoria was just 3 years old when Valerie Mack was killed, but we'll dive more into that later in the episode. Jessica Taylor, 2003. In 2003, Jessica Taylor was 20 years old and living in Manhattan when she was working as an escort. She was close with her family, especially her mother, Elizabeth Baxiel, and her cousin, Jasmine. Her family has described her as an active and energetic girl growing up. She loved to read and dance and enjoyed playing double dutch. I have no idea what that is, but okay. Though she had struggles in her adulthood, her family has emphasized that she was a normal kid and adored by everyone around her. She was last seen on July the 21st, 2003, near the Port Authority bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan. Just 5 days later, on July the 26th, a local woman walking a dog discovered her partial remains in the same stretch of woods in Manorville, Long Island, where Valerie Mack had been found 3 years prior. And like Valerie Mack, additional remains were then linked to her in 2011 off Ocean Parkway. Although it's the type of gruesome detail I usually skip, I want to point something out because it highlights Rex Heuermann's brutality. As he admitted to just weeks ago, he decapitated Jessica Taylor and severed her arm from her body. Why? First of all, investigators have openly stated that they believe that this was done to prevent identification by face fingerprints or tattoos. Okay, fair enough. There's a good... I'm like, why? You fucking psycho? Then it's like, oh no, because you didn't want to be caught. Well, that's not a psycho move, that's a calculated move. Which I guess could be a psycho. Look, there's no need to defend Rex. He's a fucking piece of shit. So as we've seen, the Gilgo Beach Killer not only stole these women's lives and took them from their loved ones, but he very deliberately made sure that those loved ones would suffer with uncertainty for decades. Again, not to defend old Rex here, but I don't think he did it because he wanted their families to suffer. I think he did it because he didn't want to get caught. Additionally, Heuermann's MO, and if they identify the victim, he's more likely to get caught, right? Because they're going to start putting things together and working things out. Additionally, Heuermann's MO of dismemberment and then dumping the remains in multiple places shows the sheer effort and work that he put into his crimes. And that raises the question of how nobody noticed. However, despite all the work, Heuermann apparently wasn't even that good at it. You see, in addition to the dismemberment, he used a sharp instrument to mutilate a tattoo on her right hip. It was a red heart with an angel wing and the words Remy's Angel in reference to a former boyfriend. Don't get tattoos with your boyfriend's or girlfriend's name on, okay? Your boyfriend or girlfriend, things could end. Despite the mutilation, Suffolk County investigators took a photo of it and sent it out in law enforcement bulletins. About 7 months after her body was found, a Washington, D.C. detective saw the photo while reviewing police bulletins. Jessica Taylor had previously spent time in D.C., and he recognized the tattoo from interactions that it had with her. He immediately contacted the Suffolk County Police Department and gave them her name. Why? Really? You'd remember the tattoo of a rat? Wait, was she arrested? Or what was this guy up to with the escort? Just absolutely speculating here. I'm assuming not what you immediately jump to, because if he was a cop and he was like, yeah, no, I know who that was. I've seen her naked hips. Don't know why. Just happened to have seen them. You would tip off anonymously, wouldn't you? Since they had a name, the cops didn't need to use the elaborate and intricate DNA genealogy method. Instead, they simply got a DNA sample from Jessica's mother and compared it to the remains that they found. And it was a match. After Rex Heuermann pleaded guilty in April 2026, gosh, so recently, as last month at the time of recording, Jessica's mother Elizabeth expressed a profound sense of relief that the legal battle was finally over. Now her daughter's memory could rest after decades of uncertainty. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 2007. In 2007, Maureen Brainerd Barnes was 25 years old. She lived in Norwich, Connecticut, but regularly travelled to Manhattan where she worked as an escort, meeting clients she met via Craigslist. That seems really dangerous. Obviously it's a dangerous thing, but isn't Craigslist full of I don't know. It feels like it's I don't know much about Craigslist, but it feels like it's full of crimes. To Maureen's family, she was a devoted mother of two, a talented writer and a resilient young woman, providing for her loved ones. Growing up in Groton, Connecticut, She wrote furtively, filling up composition notebooks with poetry and song lyrics. She was bright and kept straight A's in high school. Nevertheless, she dropped out at 17 when she became pregnant with her first child, Nicolette. She later went back and earned her GED. Is that what you get when you graduate high school? Some sort of general education diploma? Just guess. Maureen worked a number of jobs over the years to support her kids, including as a blackjack dealer at the Foxwoods Resort Casino, a cashier, and a telemarketer. Sometime around 2006, she found an online advertisement offering modeling opportunities. She sent in photos of herself, and through that process, met a friend who introduced her to the Craigslist-based escort industry. She'd be like, oh, no, I wanted a modeling job, not an escorting job. She started taking weekend trips to Manhattan to meet clients, always telling friends and family that she was going for modeling gigs. She stopped escorting when she became pregnant with her second child, but after he was born, she became worried that she couldn't make her mortgage payments and would lose custody of her children. She went back to sex work, and on July 9, 2007, she took the Amtrak to Grand Central Terminal in Manhattan in hopes of making about $3,000 over a few days. Friends saw Maureen Braden Barnes in the city on the night of the 9th. At 11:43 p.m., she called a friend and said that she was about to go meet a client. She was never seen or heard from again. Gonna guess that client was old Rex, wasn't it? Unlike some of the victims, this immediately set off alarm bells with her friends and family who were in frequent contact with her. 5 days later, on July 14, 2007, a friend officially filed a missing persons report with the Norwich Police Department. Eventually, the case was transferred to the NYPD since that was where she was last seen. Maureen's case included a chilling clue that one could argue wasn't given proper attention by the police. Shortly after she vanished, her friend Sarah Carnes got a call from a blocked number. The man on the other end claimed that Maureen was alive and staying at a, quote, whorehouse in Queens. When Carnes asked the man to identify himself or call back from an unblocked number so she could give the info to the police, he said he would, but he never did. It's not exactly surprising. Carnes noted that the caller had no discernible regional accent, and I'll get to the importance of this clue shortly. Despite greater investigative activity on Maureen Braden Barnes' case, her body was not found until 3 days later, in December 2010, with the rest of the Gilgo Four. Police are fairly certain she is the first of the four to have been killed. Maureen's daughter, Nicolette Braden Barnes, is now 25, the age her mother was when she died. She lives in Rhode Island. When Rex Heuermann was finally charged with her mother's murder in January 2024, she stood in front of the cameras and uttered one of the most heartbreaking lines of this entire case, and we'll quote her here. I remember she read to me every single night, and now I can no longer remember the sound of her voice. Melissa Barthelemy, 2009. In 2009, Melissa Barthelemy was 24. She was living in the Bronx, working as an escort via Craigslist under the alias Chloe. While all of Rex Heuermann's victims were petite, she was one of the smallest at just 4 feet 10 inches, 147 centimeters, and 95 pounds or 43 kilos. Melissa was originally from upstate New York near Buffalo, where she grew up in a close-knit family. She was said to have a bubbly, outgoing personality. She had a passion for hair and makeup. In fact, she decided to move to New York City in hopes of pursuing her cosmetology dreams. According to her sister Amanda, she wanted to get a job at a nice salon. However, early financial difficulties prompted her to begin working as an escort. Melissa was last seen on July 12, 2009, outside her apartment in the Unionport neighborhood of the Bronx. She told a friend she was going to meet a client. She deposited $1,000 into her bank account that day. 6 days later, on July 18th, Melissa's mother, Lynn Barthelemy, officially reported her missing with the Erie County Sheriff's Office. Like with Maureen Braden Barnes, the case was eventually transferred to the NYPD, since that was where she disappeared. Her family's initial concern turned to outright terror when Melissa's 15-year-old sister Amanda started receiving phone calls from a man using a cell phone. These were a considerable escalation in Heuermann's MO, as the calls were a step up in cruelty from the ones he'd made to Maureen Braden Barnes' friend. In one call, the man, presumably Rex Heuermann, asked Amanda if she, quote, was a whore, like her sister. Finally, he told her sister was dead, and that he was going to, quote, watch her rot. Okay, maybe he did do it just to, earlier on I was like, no, he did all that stuff, so he didn't want to get caught. Maybe he did want the families to suffer. Why? I mean, I don't know why. I try to figure out the why, because his brain is fucked up. It doesn't logically compute for a regular person, but what the fuck? Because the calls were short, police could not trace the exact location. No, it's like the movies. I thought that was just a movie thing. But they were able to determine that it was made in Manhattan near Madison Square Garden and Times Square. They also traced a call to Massapequa. Still, despite the phone call clue, no one connected Melissa Barthelemy to Maureen Braden Barnes until both bodies were found with the Gilgo Four in December 2010. Over the next 13 years, before Rex Heuermann was arrested, Melissa's mother was a fierce, vocal advocate for her daughter, regularly expressing frustration with the lack of police response. She made sure that Melissa's background did not cause her to be dismissed and told the world she was a beloved daughter who was deeply missed. Megan Waterman, 2010. In 2010, Megan Waterman was 22 years old. She was a victim of sex trafficking, having met a Brooklyn pimp named Akeem Cruz earlier that year. He was arrested on sex trafficking charges in 2012, but is not believed to have been connected to her disappearance or murder. Megan grew up in Scarborough, Maine. She had a rough childhood. She lived in motels with her mother and father until allegations of child neglect and an unstable environment prompted child welfare services to place her and her older brother into foster care. Eventually, her grandmother, Muriel, took them in and raised them. Despite her chaotic upbringing, she still kept in contact with her mother throughout her life. Megan had a daughter, who was 3 years old when she went missing, named Liliana. She made sure to call her every night. Over Memorial Day weekend in 2010, Megan travelled from Maine to New York with Akeem Cruz. They were staying in a Holiday Inn Express in Halpage, Long Island, about 15 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. The hotel surveillance footage captured her walking out of the lobby at around 1:30 a.m. on June the 6th. She told Cruz she was going to meet a client at a nearby convenience store. It's a weird place to... Okay. She was never seen alive again. After she failed to call her daughter, she was reported missing on June the 8th. Her body was found in December 2010 with the Gilgo 4. Because there was an active missing persons case and she had disappeared in the nearby area, the police easily identified her by matching DNA samples from her family. Now a murder investigation. Megan's mother, Lorraine Ehler, was deeply critical of the initial police response and accused them of dismissing her daughter because she was a sex worker. What? Lorraine, the police? No, never. She travelled to New York and held vigils. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2022, less than a year before Rex Heuermann was arrested, never knowing the full story of what had happened to her daughter. Amber Lynn Costello, 2010. In 2010, Amber Lynn Costello was 27 years old. She was living in a house in West Babylon, Long Island, with several other people who, like her, were struggling with heroin addiction. She had moved there from Florida in the hopes of getting clean, but the addiction had sadly followed her. She turned to sex work to fund it, using Craigslist to advertise her services under the aliases of Carolina or Mia. She grew up close with her family and had 2 older sisters. She was known to be an incredibly giving person and deeply religious, said to read the Bible often. Rex Heuermann's interaction with Amber Lynn Costello was much more elaborate than with the other victims, and is a large part of the reason why he was ultimately caught. Oh goody! On September the 1st, 2010, he went to her house in West Babylon for a paid encounter he'd arranged via burner-phone. Unbeknownst to him, Amber and her roommates had come up with a scheme to rob him. During the session, one of the roommates burst into the room pretending to be an angry boyfriend, causing Heuermann to run and leave his money behind. The next night, September the 12th, Heuermann called Amber. Bizarrely, he wasn't angry about the robbery, but instead offered her $1,500 to meet her again. The roommates urged her not to go through with it, since it was suspicious, given what they'd done to him, but she needed the money. Oh, this is a bad idea. Oh no. Amber walked out of the house wearing only a pink hoodie and jeans. She left her phone behind, suggesting she expected to be right back. She was never seen alive again. While her roommates were scared to contact the police due to their drug use and involvement in the sex industry, Amber's sister Kimberly had no such qualms. After she didn't hear from her sister, she went straight to New York and filed a missing persons report with the Suffolk County Police Department. In the ensuing investigation, and remember this is 2010, police received the clue that basically should have solved the case within weeks. Yeah, because there were a bunch of people in the house who saw this dude and were part of the robbery. Come on. It's pretty insane that he would go on to actually kill her, because you'd be like, "Fuck, that was close," and then not do it again because they could ID you. Why are you flying so close to the sun? Her roommates had all seen him, exactly. One person gave a description to detectives. He was a large white man, ogre-like, in the witnesses' words. More importantly, they identified the car. He was driving a dark-coloured first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. How many people in Suffolk County fitting that description were driving that car at the time? Nevertheless, that information simply went into a police file and sat there for over a decade. Fucking hell, I just assumed that the roommates never went to the police because they're all, they're afraid because they're drug addicts. But wow. Wow, police, what the fuck? In the meantime, Amber's body was discovered just a few months later along Ocean Parkway with the rest of the Gilgo 4. They'd ID'd her by matching her DNA to familial samples. While Rex Heuermann's description was just sitting there in a file cabinet for anyone to cross-reference, Amber's sisters Kimberly and Joanne McKee became prominent vocal advocates for the Gilgo Beach victims. Joanne appeared in a number of documentaries and news specials and slammed law enforcement for dismissing the women as sex workers. She had a clear message. Amber was a human being, and she was battling a disease, addiction. She was not just a prostitute to be forgotten. Shannon Gilbert, the spark. Shannon Gilbert is the whole reason that this case exists. Without her disappearance, the Gilgo Beach Killer might have never been caught. She is the reason there was a search and why a canine dog ended up in the right tangle of brush off Ocean Parkway in December 2010 to discover the body of Melissa Barthelemy. We also have to talk about Shannon Gilbert because at the time of this recording, with Rex Heuermann's confessions and guilty plea officially on the record, we still do not know what happened to her. The Suffolk County Police Department and DA have always maintained that she was not a victim of the Gilgo Beach Killer or any murderer. They insist she died in a tragic accident. Heuermann's defense attorney has reinforced this, telling reporters the week his client pleaded guilty that he, quote, had nothing to do with Shannon Gilbert. Shannon's family, however, believes that she was murdered. She started this case, yet 16 years later, with the perpetrator convicted, she still remains an open mystery floating on the periphery. So let's go over the facts, shall we? The night of May 1st, 2010. In 2010, Shannon Maria Gilbert was 23 years old. Originally from upstate New York, she'd moved to Jersey City, New Jersey, where she worked as an escort via, wait for it, Craigslist. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and struggled with depression. Shannon was the eldest of 4 sisters. Her childhood was turbulent. She and her sisters spent time in the foster care system due to problems at home. Nevertheless, Shannon was incredibly smart, and despite her troubled home life, she was able to graduate high school early at 16. She had aspirations of becoming a writer. At some point on the night of April 30th, 2010, Shannon was contacted by a man in Oak Beach, Long Island, named Joseph Brewer. He wanted her to come and meet him. Shannon's driver, a man named Michael Pack, who also served as a kind of security guard, drove her from Manhattan to Oak Beach, which lies just 7 miles down Ocean Parkway from Gilgo Beach. Neither of them had met this Joseph Brewer before, and they weren't familiar with the area. The two arrived at Brewer's house in Oak Beach sometime in the early morning hours of May the 1st. According to Pack, he waited in the SUV while Shannon went inside. To this day, I feel like this is smart to have this security guard, but it does feel a little bit like pimpish. Like, how are you getting paid? To this day, no one knows for sure what happened inside that house. What we do know is that at 4:51 a.m., Shannon Gilbert called 911 from inside Joseph Brewer's home. We know because it's on tape. The call lasted 23 minutes. Wow, okay. The Suffolk County Police Department spent more than a decade fighting to keep the tape of the 911 call from being released. Why? But her family's lawyer fought back. In 2020, an appellate court ordered it to be released. In May 2022, Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison played excerpts of the audio at a press conference. And honestly, it's hard to listen to. Though at times she slurs her words incoherently, Shannon seems perfectly coherent at other times. Sometimes she goes totally silent. Sometimes she starts screaming. Most notably, at the beginning of the call, she states clearly, "There's somebody after me," and repeatedly, "They're trying to kill me." Later, the male voice, "Oh, this is the woman who was in the house," right at the beginning and then leaves. Is that right? Later, the male voices of Joseph Brewer and Michael Pack, who'd come inside the house at some point, can be heard on the tape. Both men seem to be trying to get her to leave the house. At one point, Shannon asks Pack, "Are you going to kill me?" "No," said Pack. "Come on, you're freaking me out. Come on, let's go." Is she having an episode of some kind? Because Pack's her driver, her bodyguard, out in the middle of nowhere, Shannon says. "Let's go back," Pack continues. "Let's go back to Manhattan, all right? We're in Long Island. We're near the water. So the ocean." Shannon just says, "Please, stop." Pack says, "Come on. It's me, Mike. Come on, let's go." And Shannon just repeats, "No. Stop it. Please." Around the 15-minute mark, Shannon goes silent for over 2 minutes. When noise can be heard again, she's clearly running outside and breathing heavily, having fled the house. By the 21-minute mark, she had reached 17 Fairway Drive, where 75-year-old retired insurance fraud investigator Gus Coletti lived. On the tape, we can hear Shannon's interaction with him, though it's not entirely audible. He does ask if somebody is after her, and she states bluntly, "I need help." The fact that she goes in and then leaves, and the thing with the driver and all of this, it does feel like she's having some sort of psychiatric episode. As Coletti goes to call 911 himself, Shannon gets up and runs out of his house. Her rapid footsteps are the last we hear of her call. However, we do know she kept running. She ran to the next house where a woman named Barbara Brennan lived. Brennan called 911 too, but Shannon fled once again. Suffolk County Police arrived in Oak Beach at around 5:40 am, roughly an hour after Shannon first dialed 911. But by then, she was gone. She was never seen alive again. The accidental discovery. So no one knows exactly where Shannon Gilbert ran to after leaving Barbara Brennan's house. Suffolk County investigators have since theorized that she followed an east-west drainage trench through the marshland. Pieces of her clothing and personal belongings were found north of that trench. But in May 2010, nobody found her. Police searched extensively with dogs and helicopters, but months passed with no leads. By December of that year, Suffolk County Police were still searching for her along Ocean Parkway. On December the 11th, a K-9 officer named John Marlier was working a stretch of brush near Gilgo Beach with his cadaver dog, a German Shepherd named Blue. Suddenly, Blue signaled that he'd found something. But it wasn't Shannon. Instead, Blue had smelled the deceased body of Melissa Barthelemy, wrapped in burlap. If you recall, she was the aspiring cosmetologist who'd been missing from the Bronx since July 2009. Police swarmed the area, and within 48 hours they'd discovered the 3 other bodies of the Gilgo Four along a single quarter-mile stretch of Ocean Parkway: Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Berlin Costello. A few months later, in March and April of 2011, police expanded their search and found 6 more sets of human remains. Some of those, such as Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Karen Vergata, would be linked to Rex Heuermann after more than a decade. 3 others, however, are not considered to be part of the Gilgo Beach serial killings. Tanya Jackson, originally called Peaches by investigators due to a tattoo she had, and Tatiana Dykes, originally called Baby Doe because her body was that of a 2-year-old toddler, were finally identified. Jesus, it's a bit much, guys. Were finally identified in 2025. Tatiana's father, Andrew Dykes, was arrested and charged with Tanya's murder. The third remains unidentified to this day, and is known only as Asian Doe because genetic analysis showed Han Chinese ancestry. The body was found wearing women's clothing, but had XY chromosomes, leading to the possibility that they were a trans woman. Rex Heuermann's defense attorney stated, after he pled guilty, that he had nothing to do with Asian Doe. However, authorities have not made their position as clear-cut as with Tanya Jackson and Tatiana Dykes, where they charged someone else. Instead, Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney made a fairly ambiguous statement. When asked if he believed Heuermann was responsible, he said, quote, "It doesn't matter what I believe, it matters what I can prove." End quote. The most critical next step to finding Asian Doe's killer is identifying who they are. Now, regardless of who their killers were, the fact that Suffolk County Police found 10 bodies, all while looking for someone else, is telling in and of itself. Jesus Christ. Maybe you should be checking for bodies. Just get those cadaver dogs out a bit more often, guys? Come on. It was clear that for one reason or another, nobody except friends and family had been looking for these women in the first place. They were, thankfully, found by accident. And now Suffolk County PD had one of the largest homicide investigations in the history of Long Island, arguably of the United States, on their hands. Shannon is finally found. While the Gilgo Four were discovered in December 2010, Shannon Gilbert's body was not found until December 2011, a full year and 19 months after her disappearance. Well, couldn't we say that 2 years and 7 months after her disappearance? Why phrase it like that, Chris? On December, a search team was working a marsh in Oak Beach, less than a mile from where she'd last been seen running. They found her purse, cell phone, jeans, shoes, and a tube of lip gloss. On December the 13th, the team using metal detectors recovered her skeletonized remains in the same marsh, entangled in overgrown shrubs. The Suffolk County Office of the Medical Examiner noted that part of her hyoid bone, a small horseshoe-shaped bone in the throat that often fractures during strangulation, was missing. The official ruling on her cause of death is undetermined. The police do have an unofficial theory, though, which was leaked to the press. They believe Shannon was high on some sort of substance. She got paranoid. She ran into the marsh in a panic. She got disoriented, cold, and possibly stuck. Then she either drowned or died of exposure. In May 2022, Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison made their position clear. Quote, "Based on the evidence, the facts, and the totality of the circumstances, the prevailing opinion of Shannon's death, while tragic, was not murder, and most likely not criminal." It is important to note that Joseph Brewer was ruled out as a suspect by Suffolk County PD early on. At first I thought Joseph Brewer was just an alias for Rex Heuermann, but obviously not. Michael Pack, who drove her to Oak Beach and drove away after she ran into the night, has never been charged with a crime either, and was never officially a person of interest or a suspect. Yeah, rightly so, I don't think She seemed to be, the only thing that was weird was she was like, "Are you trying to kill me?" And he's like, "No, I'm Michael." Which is such a statement of what? Both men took polygraph tests and passed. I mean, it's polygraph tests, that's nonsense. I'll talk a bit more about that later. Okay, polygraphs, really? Do we need to bother? Shannon Gilbert's family, however, has never accepted the police's conclusion. In 2016, they hired Dr. Michael Baden, the former chief medical examiner of New York City and one of the most renowned forensic pathologists in the United States, to conduct an independent review of Shannon's remains. His report concluded, quote, "There is no evidence whatsoever that Shannon Gilbert died a natural death. There is no evidence whatsoever that Shannon Gilbert died from a drug overdose. And there is no evidence whatsoever that Shannon Gilbert died from drowning." This is very different from specifying a cause of death, though. This is much, much softer than that. He did not certify a cause of death, but he did claim that the autopsy findings were consistent with homicide or strangulation. Well, that is a statement there, isn't it? The doctor across the way. Now, there's a bizarre twist in the Shannon Gilbert story. In 2010, Dr. Charles Peter Hackett was a former Suffolk County Police Department surgeon. Police departments have surgeons? I thought surgeons worked at hospital. It's no, I only work with the police. He lived in Oak Beach, his house less than half a mile from where Shannon was last seen alive. 2 days after Shannon disappeared, Dr. Hackett called her mother, Marie Wait, Dr. Hackett called her mother, and I'm I'm such a sexist. For some reason, I just had it in my mind that the doctor was a dude. His name is Charles Peter! It must be a typo from Chris. Let's just say his mother for now, Marie Gilbert in upstate New York. According to her account, repeated to multiple journalists and even attested to in civil court, Hackett told her that he had taken Shannon into his home that night and medicated her to calm her down. She had then run away. Whoa. Okay. Yet when interviewed by police, and then during a civil deposition after Shannon's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him, Dr. Hackett has denied the call and ever meeting Shannon. Of course, it was easy to pull full phone records and see that yes, he did call Marie Gilbert. Forced to admit the calls, Hackett just said he'd been exaggerating for attention. Suffolk County Police determined he was merely a busybody and cleared him as a suspect. Bro, this is why you shouldn't be a busybody, because one day you're going to get yourself into some proper trouble, mate. This was very fucking close. Then, while the Gilbert family's legal team was preparing their civil suit, they interviewed an Oak Beach neighbor named Bruce Anderson. He swore, in a notarized affidavit, that in the winter of 2011, Dr. Hackett personally confessed to him. He said, "Dr. Hackett personally told me that Dr. Hackett ran a home for wayward girls, that he had taken Shannon Gilbert into his home in May 2010, that he had treated her with medication that he had administered to her, that she was confused and had left his home, never to return." There's a very awkwardly worded sentence there. Another odd detail is that Shannon Gilbert's driver, Michael Pack, fell asleep during his polygraph test. Now, we all get tired sometimes, and I don't want to rush to any judgment. Bro's taking a sedative to chill out on the polygraph. A lot of sedative. However, some online sleuths have pointed that people sometimes use sedatives, there you go, to pass polygraph tests even when they're lying. I'll make it clear, none of these people have been charged with any crimes. Also, to be fair, if you're going to take a polygraph and you're really nervous about it, as you would be, you'll be like, oh my god, my nerves are going to make it seem like I'm lying and I'm going to get into real trouble. I'm just going to pop one of those Valiums that I got last year from the doctor after, I don't know, whatever reason people got a Valium. So, it's interesting, but it's nothing really. I'll make it clear none of these people charged with any crimes, not Joseph Brewer, Michael Pack, or Dr. Charles Hackett. I'm not accusing them of anything either, and the stance of the authorities is that Shannon died in an accident. I think this whole thing, I just don't know. I don't know. There's not enough information. Since Shannon's disappearance, Joseph Brewer has sold his home in Oak Beach and moved away. Michael Pack has similarly kept a low profile. Dr. Hackett relocated to Florida, and the Gilbert family's civil suit against him was dismissed because the statute of limitations had already expired by the time they filed it. Suffolk County and the Lost Decade. So, during the search for one woman, the Suffolk County Police discovered the bodies of nearly a dozen women, apparently murdered by multiple killers. That all of this was happening under their noses, that these women were missing for so long with next to no effort put into finding them, that a serial killer had been operating in their jurisdiction for at least 17 years, these are all frustrating facts on their own. However, despite the fact that they just had all this thrown in their face in dramatic fashion, the story of the ensuing investigation is frankly even more infuriating. Oh, for God's sake. The Chief of Police. In January 2012, just over a year after the Gilgo Four were found, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone appointed James Burke as Chief of the Suffolk County Police Department. Now, before we even get into what Burke did as Chief of Police, we have to talk about what he'd already done before that. In 1995, an internal Suffolk County Police Department investigation found that Burke, who was a relatively junior officer at the time, had, quote, had a relationship with a woman engaged in prostitution and drug dealing, and had engaged in sex acts in police vehicles while on duty and in uniform, end quote. Right, this guy. He somehow made it to Chief of Police. Holy shit. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, what's this guy up to? Jesus. According to an anonymous letter sent to Steve Bellone before his appointment of Burke, the officer had, quote, an extensive personnel file highlighting his lack of fitness for such a critical position. It warned the executive that hiring him as chief would lead to a massive scandal. Yeah, dude. I mean, come on, the guy's background, he can't be police chief. He was right. No shit. Internal Affairs probes during his early career also found that Burke had lost his department-issued service weapon on 2 separate occasions. Lost, however, is being generous, as it was alleged that it was actually stolen by the sex worker he was seeing. You got made Chief of Police, motherfucker, what the fuck? Additionally, though they were ultimately dismissed by the department, he faced allegations that he used illegal drugs, stole them from drug dealers, and failed to invoice confiscated drugs during police operations. This guy's crooked as fuck, allegedly. Normally, these controversies would end a cop's career, not get him appointed Chief of Police. Clearly, something was happening behind the scenes. Allegedly. To understand, we have to go all the way back to the evening of April the 20th, 1979, when a 13-year-old boy named John Pierce Jr. asked his father if he could ride his bike to the nearby Dogwood Elementary School. He said he'd be back after 15 minutes. He never returned. After searching all night, John's father found the boy's wallet on the school playground and enlisted more family members to help search. They found John's bike under a pile of leaves. Oh, God. And then tragically his body buried under logs and branches. He was bruised and cut, and had 6 rocks in his throat. Police what the fuck? What's wrong with this? Kid's 13, what the fuck? Police later found a shoe print on his body, and 6 more footprints nearby. Investigators set their sights on 4 teenagers, Thomas Rahn, Robert Brensick, Michael Quarantaro, and Peter Quarantaro. All 4 were ultimately convicted of the boy's murder in a controversial case whose outcome is still disputed. Apparently, none of the footprints near the body matched theirs, and 2 of them have since had their convictions overturned. Oh my. The prosecuting attorney managed to convict in large part thanks to a witness statement of a 14-year-old boy who claimed that he'd overheard Michael Quarantaro say that he wanted to kill John Pierce because the boy had caught the 4 teenagers stealing a mini bike and he was afraid he'd report it. That's the evidence that you convicted 4 kids to send to prison for murder? And potentially let the real person get away? That's fucked up. The prosecuting attorney was Assistant District Attorney Thomas Spotter, who at the time of the Gilgo Beach discoveries had risen to District Attorney. And that 14-year-old witness was James Burke. While I don't want to weigh in on the implications for the John Pierce case, suffice it to say that Spotter took Burke under his wing and helped him with his policing career. Oh shit. Oh shit, no! Oh my god, that's super fucking fucked up. As Spotter himself rose to the position of the country's highest law enforcement official, he gave Burke protection and helped sweep his scandals under the rug. Why? Why? By come on. I know why, because he helps you out with the case. It's fucking super crooked. Fuck you all. By 2012, Spotter had his protege running one of the largest serial killer investigations in American history. James Burke takes the wheel. As the new chief of police, James Burke's first move in the Gilgo Beach investigation was to force the Suffolk County Chief of Detectives, Dominic Varone, to retire under threat of demotion. He then removed the detectives under him who had been working the case for a year. Nobody on the new team asked the former detectives to debrief them. The case basically started over from scratch, over a year after the bodies were found and nearly 2 decades after the first murder. I fucking hate you, James Burke. You seem like a real douche. Like, you've just fallen upwards somehow despite being a fucking clown, allegedly in my opinion. Burke's next move was to systematically remove the FBI from the investigation. Yeah, I mean, what can the FBI at solving crimes? You always got to leave it to the local police. They really know what they're doing. In principle, the Gilgo Beach murders were not under the FBI's jurisdiction, since they had all presumably taken place inside the state of New York, and indeed within Suffolk County. Nonetheless, local and state police authorities regularly enlisted the help of the FBI in massive serial killer investigations such as these, thanks to their greater resources, in particular, their psychological profiling experts. Right, because theoretically, you're all the fucking same team, but not here. Fuck the FBI. They had been informally assisting Suffolk County with their case since the initial discoveries in 2010. Burke, however, pulled all of the Suffolk County Police off the FBI task force. He also issued a formal department directive signed by him personally, instructing Suffolk County officers to notify a supervisor anytime they were contacted by an outside law enforcement agency, such as the FBI. A retired detective named Rob Trotter, who at the time had been assigned to the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force on Long Island, summed it up like this. Basically, they didn't want anyone talking to the FBI anymore. The FBI is offering to help you. They're giving you the people that are going to do it. They're planning for the expense of it. But Jimmy Burke, he didn't want the FBI involved in Suffolk County in any way, shape, or form. End quote. Which just seems like because he doesn't want the case to get solved for whatever reason. Or he's just so fucking arrogant that he's like, I don't need the FBI. Either way, one is either like corruption and one is just incompetence. Either way, douche, in my opinion. Even worse, Burke denied the subpoenas. His own detectives had drawn up the cell phone tower records. The senior FBI agent on Long Island at the time, Geraldine Hart, who years later would go on to become the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, has blatantly called out Burke and his mentor, Thomas Spotter, over this. Quote, a lot of hard work had been done on cell phones early on, and then it kind of, dissipated after that. That was the doing of Tom Spotter and James Burke. End quote. Of course, James Burke justified these actions in various ways. He claimed the FBI would be stepping on the toes of his highly capable local detectives. As for the subpoenas, he tried saying they were too broad, or too expensive, or legally unnecessary. However, since Burke's past and the corruption within the county has come to light, many believe a more sinister explanation. He didn't want anyone uncovering the crimes he was actively participating in while acting as police chief. If the FBI was around, they might catch him. If they subpoenaed cell phone records while looking at sex workers, well, he had been patronizing sex workers. What are the odds that he'd show up in their searches? So this guy, to cover his ass, is basically like, nah, let a serial killer get away. God damn, dude, you fucking asshole. Allegedly. The duffel bag. In December 2012, not even a year into James Burke's tenure as chief of police, a 27-year-old man named Christopher Loeb, wait, haven't we covered him? Was breaking into cars in an affluent neighborhood of St. James in Suffolk County looking for things he could sell to support his heroin habit. I guess that's another Loeb. We covered a Loeb. Didn't we cover a Loeb here on this channel? One of the cars he broke into was James Burke's unlocked department-issued GMC Yukon SUV. What's a daisy? You broke into a police car. He swiped a canvas duffel bag and made off with it. Inside the duffel bag were Burke's gun belt, his ammunition, a box of cigars, pornography, sex toys, and bottles of Viagra. Holy shit, this guy he looks at that bag and he's like, this guy's fucking wild. With his embarrassing secrets in the hands of a thief, James Burke freaked out. He bypassed normal police protocols and dispatched a massive police response with helicopters and K9 units, far more than would usually be devoted to the theft of a duffel bag. He's like, and when you find it, don't look inside! With the extensive resources allotted to the case, detectives quickly found Loeb thanks to a GPS device had stolen from another vehicle. They raided... You stole the GPS device from a... They raided Loeb's home, arrested him and brought him to the 4th Precinct in Hoppage. They also recovered Burke's duffel bag, which they definitely didn't look inside. They're like, here's your bag, Burke. What the fuck are you planning this weekend, mate? Once Loeb was in an interrogation room, handcuffed to a flooring, James Burke came in and ordered everyone out except 3 of his most loyal detectives. He then proceeded to beat the hapless, restrained suspect, even threatened to kill him with a hot shot, a slang term for a lethal dose of heroin. Later in court, Christopher Loeb described the beating. "Every time I asked for a lawyer, I got hit again. I got hit again. I got choked. I got choked. I got punched. I got slapped." Christopher Loeb complained to the Federal Department of Justice, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York opened an investigation. But Burke went through great lengths to cover his tracks, and he had the perfect ally to defend him, District Attorney Thomas Spotter. The corruption continues. Remember him? Yes, of course I remember him, Chris. It was merely a few pages ago. He's the mentor guy who's a piece of shit as well, allegedly, in my opinion. He's a lawyer, so just throw those in there just in case. Along with Spotter's chief of the Government Corruption Bureau, Christopher McPartland, they orchestrated an elaborate, long-term conspiracy to keep the truth under wraps. They intimidated witnesses and threatened the 3 detectives who'd seen the beating, telling them that if they spoke to the FBI or Internal Affairs, they'd destroy their careers. God damn, dude. I fucking hate corruption. Corruption is just such a piece of shit. At small levels like this, it means that justice isn't served. At country levels, it just makes countries shit. Corruption is a fucking plague. Spotter labeled anyone cooperating with the FBI's investigation a rat. "You're the district attorney! You should like rats!" And threatened that informants would never work in Suffolk County again. They even falsified reports so that James Burke wasn't recorded as being in the interrogation room that day. Finally, as DA, Spotter aggressively prosecuted Loeb for the thefts in an attempt to keep him locked up and destroy his credibility. Perhaps what's most disturbing, though, is James Burke's utter confidence in the corruption he benefited from. Even as the federal investigation appeared to be closing in on him, he allegedly brushed it off to one of his cronies, saying he could spend a few years playing cards with mobsters in prison and then just move into law enforcement consulting. Luckily, that confidence was misplaced. Excellent! The Reckoning. Oh good. So hopefully all of my allegedlys will not have been necessary because he gets sentenced and, found guilty of this shit. By December of 2013, it appeared that James Burke had won. The FBI closed their case on the beating of Christopher Loeb. They'd served grand jury subpoenas to the 3 detectives who'd been in the interrogation room, Kenneth Bombase, Anthony Leto, and Michael Malone, but none of them flipped. Thomas Spotter's intimidation tactics had kept them in line. Leto even went into a state courtroom that year and denied that the assault ever happened. Unbeknownst to Burke, though, the feds had secretly reopened their investigation in summer 2015. Good. Look, the FBI doing a fantastic job. This is the FBI. Let's go. Anthony Leto finally broke down, literally, and cooperated with the federal government in exchange for immunity. He reportedly collapsed during his grand jury testimony. Kenneth Bombase and Michael Malone followed suit, also in exchange for immunity. Bada bing bada, let's go! The biggest blow came when Lieutenant, we're in America, James Hickey flipped. He wasn't in the room when Burke beat Christopher Loeb, but he was basically the chief's top crony and enforcer. He was the guy Burke and Spotter used to keep the detectives in line. Because he had deep knowledge of the corruption, including having had direct conversations with Thomas Spotter and Christopher McPartland about covering up Burke's crimes, he became the prosecution's star witness. In this case, Hickey didn't even get immunity. He pled guilty to obstruction of justice. Okay, wow. Serious stuff. Word got back to Burke that his men had turned on him and he resigned in October 2015. A few weeks later, a federal grand jury indicted him on civil rights and conspiracy charges. He pleaded guilty in February 2016 and was sentenced to 46 months, just short of 4 years in federal prison. On the day of his guilty pleas, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone, who had promoted Burke to Chief of Police, issued a statement. Quote, "Jim Burke, someone I entrusted with great responsibility, lied to my face for nearly 3 years and orchestrated a cover-up to perpetuate that lie." Yeah, like a dickhead. I'm glad he went to prison. 4 years is quite nice. Thomas Spotter kept his head above water a little longer, but was finally indicted in November 2017. Excellent! He resigned the same month. Yeah, dude, you gotta resign. It's like, they are gonna fire you, my dude. In December 2019, a federal jury convicted him of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy. Christopher McPartland, his anti-corruption chief, was convicted on the same counts. In August 2021, a US district court sentenced both men to 5 years in federal prison. Spotter was 79 at the time. He stated, "I hope not to die in prison alone." 5 years doesn't feel enough, in my opinion, for this kind of high-level corruption. Like, you're a bad dude. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Thomas Spotter was released from the Federal Correction Institute in Danbury in Connecticut in 2024. He's currently 84 years old. He has reportedly been working part-time as a non-attorney administrative clerk for his former criminal defense attorney's law firm, having been disbarred himself in 2020, as he deserved. Christopher McPartland has also been released, having similarly been disbarred. He was working at a liquor store prior to serving his sentence. As for James Burke, well, some people never learn. He served 40 months of his sentence and was released to home confinement in 2019. Was that a COVID thing? No, probably a bit early, right? He finished his probation in 2022. Then in 2023, he found himself in handcuffs once again. He was arrested at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park in Farmingville, New York, and charged with solicitation of prostitution after allegedly exposing himself to an undercover park ranger. What the f***? Why are you soliciting prostitution at a veterans... Oh, I'm sorry, Veterans Memorial Park? I thought it was like a parade or something, like there was a memorial going on, and he's trying to solicit prostitution, but he's just in some sort of park. That was confusing. According to the police report, during the arrest, he demanded to know if the park rangers knew who he was in an attempt to leverage his way out of it. It's like, dude, you're no one. You're an ex-con. You were someone, and then you went to prison and lost that shit. His post-prison escapades aside, James Burke was at least out of the way of the Gilgo Beach serial killer investigation. The FBI formally rejoined on December 10th, 2015, the day right after his indictment, but almost 5 years exactly after the Gilgo Four were discovered. For their part, Suffolk County made a point of injecting some competence back into their police department. James Burke's immediate replacement was Stuart Cameron, a long-term SCPD veteran who spent years overseeing the department's special patrol bureaus like SWAT and emergency services. He's generally credited with righting the ship and keeping everything operational while scandals ravaged the department. Good guy Stuart. I love it when the good person enters the episode and it's like, yes, he's gonna sort it all out. He's the good guy. Police competence, yes please. In 2018, Suffolk County also hired a new police commissioner, a woman named Geraldine Hart, whose pedigree can only be described as the polar opposite of James Burke's. So competent and good and not a piece of shit. A 21-year FBI veteran, she had become the senior supervisory resident agent of the FBI's Long Island office. In other words, she ran it. Plus, she was well educated, having earned a law degree from St. John's University. In 2021, Geraldine Hart left her role as police commissioner, and a man named Rodney Harrison took up the helm. Originally from Queens, he was a no-nonsense veteran of the NYPD, who had made history by becoming the first person to rise through every single sworn rank in that department, including Chief of Department, i.e., Chief of Police. Harrison, another excellent. Harrison was joined by a new district attorney, Ray Tierney, who had helped facilitate the case against James Burke and Thomas Potter. Appalled that the Gilgo Beach murders had not been solved over a decade later, they created a multi-agency Gilgo Beach homicide task force that would have the SCPD, the New York State Police, and the FBI working as a single unit. Rex has got to be like, fucking hell, the police, they got their shit together, did they? And he starts profusely sweating. 16 months after that task force was assembled, plainclothes officers fished a discarded pizza box out of a trash can in Midtown Manhattan. Less than 6 months after that, Rodney Harrison himself had walked Rex Heuermann out of the Suffolk County Police Precinct to announce his arrest to the media. Good guys close in. 11 years after police found human remains along Ocean Parkway on Jones Beach Island, the Suffolk County Gilgo Police Homicide Task Force was pretty much starting from scratch. They had no suspects, potential witnesses had moved or forgotten key details, technological data had been erased or buried in a decade of noise. Thankfully, though, as immeasurably frustrating as it is, they already had nearly everything they needed. They could have done it so quickly, but they didn't. A corrupt administration had just sat on it for years. Luckily, the task force was fully aware that the investigation had been totally fumbled over the preceding decade. As a result, their first step was to start over and take a fresh look at everything the cops had originally dug up, starting with the 2010 investigation. Back in 2012, Suffolk County detectives had, along with help from the FBI, done preliminary cell tower analysis on the burner numbers used to taunt Melissa Barthelemmy's family and make contact with the other Gilgo 4 victims. They'd made considerable progress, finding that most of the calls traced back to cell towers in a confined geographical area, specifically a few square blocks within Massapequa Park. They referred to this area as the Box. Additionally, while the phones were active in Massapequa Park, on Long Island at night, and on weekends, they connected to towers in Midtown Manhattan during the workday. Bro is some amateur-ass criminal right now. He's like, no, I take my phones to crime. Oh, wait, no, sorry. He's using his phone. He's using his burner phone in 2 locations where he is known to be. It doesn't prove anything, but it sure is suspicious, and it's going to get them to dig into it a lot more, isn't it, mate? Of course, despite that progress, James Burke had then cut the FBI out of the case. As an idiot, dude. As Geraldine Hart would later put it, all that cell phone work just dissipated, and more than 10 years passed. In 2022, the task force dusted off the file on the box and started over. They cross-referenced the cell tower analysis with arguably the most important lead the investigation had gotten, that Burke's investigation had essentially ignored: the eyewitness description of a large, ogre-like man driving a dark-coloured first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, a car only manufactured between 2002 and 2006. The number of people, the FBI would have solved this in like 5 minutes. The number of people living within the box who also owned that kind of car wasn't just small, it was 1. In March 2022, just a month after the task force was formed, a New York State Police investigator ran the data through a vehicle registration database and got a hit. A first-generation Chevy Avalanche, registered between 2009 and 2010, owned by a man inside the box. Well, I never! Plus, he was 6'4" and worked in Midtown Manhattan. Let me guess, it was Rex. It was Rex Heuermann. Oh, Rex. In a 48 Hours interview, Rodney Harrison described this moment, quote, "Once we were able to attach the Avalanche inside of that Massapequa box, which then attached to Rex Heuermann, that was a moment where we said, okay, there's something here. Yeah, again, this isn't proof, but it is going to allow them to get a warrant or whatever they need to do to get the proof that is going to put you in prison. Forever." Lips sealed. As a member of the media, this is one of the parts I find most professionally impressive. For the next 16 months, the task force managed to keep everything totally under wraps. No press leaks, no raids, no interviews. Heuermann's name appeared nowhere linked to the Gilgo Beach investigation. They knew full well that if they tipped him off in any way, he would destroy evidence, and the case against him could be jeopardized. Yeah, definitely. Like the whole, you can't destroy evidence, you can if the crime of destruction of evidence is more than fucking murdering many people. Yeah, it's good there were no leaks. I mean, no one would do raids or interviews. That's like easy to control. But the leaks thing? Fuck, shit is leaky. Instead, the task force methodically and professionally built their case with more than 300 subpoenas and search warrants. Yeah, see, that's a lot of subpoenas and a lot of search warrants to keep quiet and not leak over the process of 16 months. Really tight ship, that's impressive. Bank records, travel records, cell phone records, credit card statements, email activity. They wanted every recorded detail they could find about Rex Heuermann's life in the preceding 15 years. What they uncovered was pretty shocking. The task force found that Heuermann was currently using burner phones. He had 2 active burner numbers in 2022. They were able to catch him on surveillance video walking into a Manhattan phone shop to load minutes on one of them. He'd used those burner numbers to create 3 burner email accounts under the fake names of John Springfield, Thomas Hawk, as well as the handle Hunter1903A3. The 1903A3 or M1903A3 is a famed 30-06, 30 caliber, something like that, military rifle that saw service in the World Wars. Read into that what you will. He liked guns. One of these accounts had been used to conduct thousands of searches related to sex workers, sadistic, torture-related pornography, and child pornography. Oh, bro. Why? Why do you have to make it... Why does it have to just get worse? Investigators subpoenaed Google for records on one of the accounts and received the IP address it had been created from. It matched the ISP registered at Heuermann's home address. Bro, not even a VPN? What the fuck? 105 First Avenue, Massapequa Park. Heuermann also had a Tinder account registered under the name Andrew Andy Roberts. Along with the American Express cards used to pay for it, were tied to one of his burner phones. Wait, what? Oh, okay, so you can get like an American Express prepay card or something without your details on it? I don't know, Jesus Christ, the number of like KYC, know your customer things I have to fill out for fucking banks is never ending. Is there like, other than like paying in crypto coin or whatever, cryptocurrency, like, and even that's not really anonymous, right? Because it's all on the blockchain. Isn't that thing of people who were like buying pizzas with cryptocurrency and then buying heroin from the same account? It's like, yeah, that links, because the pizza was delivered to your house and then you bought heroin with the same crypto wallet, you big brain. I think that's how it works. I probably watched a CoffeeZilla video on it at some point. Also, surely Tinder, right? I'm just opening a water. Surely Tinder, doesn't that make you use your own name? Unfortunately, however you want to say it, like, these dating apps came around well after I was, well, with my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, so no experience with that, but surely for, like, safety reasons, they want you to, like, scan your ID or something. Although this is America, I know people are opposed to that sort of thing. But, Jesus Christ, balance of good and bad here, guys. Heuermann's travel records also painted a disturbing picture. The task force pulled commercial flight records for Asa Ellerup, Heuermann's wife. When they compared them to the dates of the Gilgo 4 murders, it matched up perfectly. When Maureen Brainerd Barnes disappeared in July 2007, Ellerup and her 2 children were in Atlantic City. When Melissa Bartholomew disappeared in July 2009, Ellerup was in Iceland visiting her family. Holy shit, a family live in Iceland? Alright. When Megan Waterman disappeared in June 2010, Ellerup was in Maryland. When Amber Costello disappeared in September 2010, Ellerup was in New Jersey. Plus, they found that Melissa Bartholomew's, goddamn that last name, Bartholomew's phone, which Heuermann was using to cruelly taunt his victim's teenage sister, went silent on August 10th, 2009. Based on subpoena travel documents, he just happened to have boarded a flight from JFK to Reykjavik with his wife on that same day. The calls then resumed on August 19th, which just happened to be the day after he flew home. You're an architect. You're somewhat intelligent. Can you not have done a slightly better job? I mean, I'm glad you didn't. Fuck you, but like, you fucking amateur, bro. Clearly, Rex Heuermann very deliberately planned his murders for when his family would be out of the house. You know what he didn't deliberately plan for? Getting away with it. Although he did get away with it for a long time, but that's not because of his skill, it's because of the police doing a shit job. Allegedly, in my opinion, until now. Finally, the task force uncovered something particularly telling. Between March 2022 and June 2023, right in the middle of their investigation, Rex Heuermann used the Thomas Hawke email account to make more than 200 Google searches related to active and known serial killers, as well as to the specific disappearances of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. 2 of those searches are goosebump-inducing. Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught, and why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by the Long Island serial killer? Oh god. He was Googling his own crimes. That is definitely one of the rules, and they were watching him do it. The second box. By the end of 2022, Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force had a massive case with pages upon pages of circumstantial evidence, but they still didn't have a single piece of physical evidence directly tying Rex Heuermann to any of the murders. They needed that smoking gun. Yeah, they do, because otherwise it's all just circumstantial, right? It's like, it's a big coincidence. Look, if I was on the jury, I'd be like, fucking put him in the chair right now and turn it on, because Jesus Christ, there is enough circumstantial evidence here. But I get the reason they want the physical evidence, especially if they can get it. Let's fucking go. But they had their man, and moreover, they had something physical they hoped had come from that man. Megan Waterman's body had been found wrapped in burlap, and stuck to that burlap had been a single male hair. Wow. I mean, for a guy who's really shit at crimes, that is tidy work, just leaving one hair. It was still sitting in evidence storage, just waiting for a DNA comparison to a suspect. But getting DNA from someone without them knowing is no small feat. For months, undercover police waited outside Heuermann's Manhattan office, followed him at lunch and swiped anything he threw away. Coffee cups, napkins, water bottles. They got some partial DNA, but not enough to solidify their case. How would I go about getting someone's DNA? Because you can't trick them, right? You could be like, yo, let's send him a message from a fake hospital saying he's got to come in for a blood test because he was exposed to some pathogen or something. That's not believable enough, is it? I feel like that would also be illegal, like entrapment or something. So how would you get his DNA? Surely at this point they could arrest him because they know it's him. They've got enough to get a subpoena for his DNA, right? Surely. Any judge would grant that. So can't they just bring him in, take his DNA, match it up, and then be like, well, we got enough to hold you. You're not getting bail. We'll just go through the process now that we got the DNA. And if the DNA doesn't match, oh shit, because if the DNA doesn't match, and that hair just happens to belong to someone else, then they've tipped their hands. Oh, I'm sorry, I get it now. My brain takes a while to do these things. Anyway. Oh, dude, what about a haircut? Does he have, or like a barber? Right? Just go to the barbers afterwards and be like, hey, can I collect that? Because people get their haircut. That's a thing. He's going to have his haircut at some point. Surely they could just go get some hair, right? Just be like, yo, barber, I'm with the FBI. You mind if I take that hair? And the barber is just going to be like, yeah, mate, go on. Sure thing. No problem. Oh, this is where I see it now, the pizza box. Then, on January the 26th, 2023, Rex Heuermann walked out of his Fifth Avenue office and got some pizza for lunch. After eating it, he threw the box in a sidewalk trash can. The cops grabbed it, and inside were several uneaten pizza crusts. Off they went to the Suffolk County Crime Lab. Nearly 5 months later, in June 2023, the lab returns their results. You couldn't have got a rush job on it? This guy's out there, and he's a hunter, dudes. The mitochondrial DNA from the crust was 99.96% a match to the male hair recovered with Megan Waterman's body. Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney would later tell 48 Hours, that was a remarkable day. It was, the weekends, and, you read, you get the report, and you read it, and then you read it again, and then you read it a third time, and then you read it a fourth time, and then you start making calls. End quote. And it's like, you're gonna be like, fuck, yes, let's fucking go! Chaining the monster. By July 2023, the task force was ready. With physical evidence, they knew they had to act. After all, Rex Heuermann was still contacting sex workers. They'd watched him in real-time surveillance contact escorts with his burner phone. He was a serial killer, actively making appointments with the women he preferred as victims. They couldn't wait any longer. How did they just wait 6 months for the lab results? It's 2023! Surely it's just... doesn't Ancestry DNA or whatever do it in, like, a week? And I know that's different because it's not like a full profile sort of thing, right? But still, come on. On the evening of... This is a priority! On the evening of Thursday, July the 13th, 2023, a team of undercover Suffolk County police officers waited for Heuermann to leave the office of his architecture firm, RH Consultants and Associates, on Fifth Avenue at 8:30 p.m. The arrest can be seen on security footage from a nearby building that was acquired by an investigative journalist. As several officers suddenly place themselves in the hulking man's path, several others run up behind him to form a circle around him. Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison said, I don't think he had any clue. And that's definitely what it looks like on tape. It's gotta be weird, right? This dude, and it's like, you have no idea. You're walking out of your office for the last time. You are taking your last breaths of free air. Ever. Because you're going to prison forever, bro. And, God, that's gotta be... I'm glad I'm not a serial killer. It's gotta be really stressful. At the same time as the arrest, a second team of police executed a search warrant on Heuermann's house at 105 First Avenue in Massapequa Park. His wife, Asa Ellerup, and her 2 adult children, Victoria and Christopher, were asleep. Wait, at the same time? They were asleep at 8:30 p.m. Sounds like me. Abruptly awoken, they were ordered to leave the house, with only the clothes on their backs, taking no personal items with them. It would not be a quick search. In fact, investigators spent more than 12 days searching that house and the surrounding property. Shortly, I'll tell you what they found. There is no place you could hide stuff. If there's a team of police officers in your house looking for shit, I'd be like, I look around, it's like, anything is always just feels like a cliche. Like, okay, so I'd unscrew the plugs, the sockets, in the wall, and I'd hide it in there. Police are opening that shit up. Okay, I'd hollow out a space in the wall, and then I'd plaster over it, but then you can't access it, so that's pointless. And also, maybe the police even check for that. They probably use some sort of echolocation to look for holes in walls, don't they? Also, American houses are made out of like that drywall stuff, right? So it's kind of hollow anyway. So it would be kind of, that or however it works. I've got inside that, they'd look everywhere. Inside, I've got a big light stand here. I imagine it's a hollow pipe. Okay, so I'd hide something in there. Police tearing that shit open, no doubt. In the meantime, Heuermann was arraigned the next morning on Friday, July the 14th, 2023, in a Suffolk County courtroom and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder for the killings of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. He was named as the prime suspect, with charges to follow in the case of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Believe it or not, he pleaded not guilty. I can't believe it. I mean, guilty or not guilty, you're gonna go away forever, right? Could he plead guilty with the idea of not getting the death penalty? I don't know what the rules are, what state this is and stuff. But it isn't. Oh, I didn't cross bounds, right? The FBI were just helping out because there's something if the crimes cross like state lines. I don't know. My knowledge of the American legal system is basically limited to this show, CSI, and Boston Legal. But if someone crosses the lines, it's the FBI's jurisdiction, then a federal can carry a death penalty, right? Anyway, his court-appointed lawyer told reporters that his client had been in tears when they met. The only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this." Rex Heuermann would maintain his innocence for the next 1,000 days. Infuriating when you consider what I'm about to tell you. House of Horrors. First Avenue, in Massapequa Park, is a lusciously green slice of Americana. Vibrant lawns frame vinyl-sided houses colored by American flags. The air is filled with the sounds of children riding bikes and playing basketball to a chorus of birds. Neighbors wave to each other as they arrive home from work in the city. Yet one house stands out. Number 105 is a relatively small single-story ranch house. Not sure what a ranch house is. To me, a ranch house would be something that exists on a ranch, like some sprawling place with horseshoes perhaps hung up on the wall. But I imagine it's not that because it's in suburban New York. Unlike its mostly off-white peers, it's conspicuously red. News reports have consistently described it the same way. Run down, disheveled, dilapidated, cluttered. The yard is overgrown, and the exterior is weathered. Yeah, because no one wants to buy the murder house with Rex Heuermann, where he grew up and everything. Ugh, just knock it down. Make a park there for the victims or something. Rex Heuermann grew up... Although that would be weird, wouldn't it? Going to where the killer was, that makes it almost like a weird shrine to him instead of that. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that cursed land. Maybe turn it into like a mini little landfill or something? I don't know. Rex Heuermann grew up in this house. He then bought it from his mother in 1994 for $170,000. He moved his second wife, Asa Ellerup, into it in 1996 and raised his daughter and stepson in it. And between 1996 and 2010, he murdered 7 innocent women in its basement. Oh, God. Wait, he did it in the house? Did I gloss over that? I must have missed that. On the night of Thursday, July the 13th, 2023, Suffolk County PD began their search of that house by abruptly waking Asa Ellerup and her 2 children. By morning, it was a crime scene. It was a crime scene for a lot. It's a crime scene for years. Just not a discovered one, Christ. Over the course of 12 days, investigators employed ground-piercing radar, an excavator, and a cadaver dog. They dug up the backyard and tore up the wooden deck. They seized a massive amount of material, which was putting it lightly, it would turn out. I want to warn you that the following sections may be a bit uncomfortable. I think the record of what was documented inside that house is important for understanding the case and what these women went through, and I will stick to that record without offering unnecessarily gratuitous details. Nonetheless, it's the darkest stretch of this episode, so skip ahead if you need to. The inventory. One of the first things investigators uncovered at 105 First Avenue was a huge stash of weapons. Well, that might be what was he after? There's the Springfield gun or something? The one I didn't know how to say the name of? The 3006? Yeah. Probably got something to do with his love of guns. 279 guns! Bro, I mean, I get that Americans like guns and stuff, but 279? You don't need to be on a list, but you should be on some sort of just a side note, owns 279 guns. Most stored in a walk-in vault in the basement, secured with a large iron door. Rifles, shotguns, handguns. Heuermann, in fact, had legal handgun permits for 92 of them. Oh wow, so he had nearly 200 unlicensed firearms? How do you buy 200 unlicensed firearms and not get caught? That's I feel like buying surely one unlicensed gun is quite tricky, isn't it? For an architect in New York. Although I suppose you're less likely, if you look like a crackhead, then it's probably harder than if you're just, a buttoned up white collar worker. Maybe? I don't know. I don't know anything about this gritty underworld. Some early reporting suggested that this vault was a soundproof room, but Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison would later deny this. It was simply a vault for Rex Heuermann's massive private firearms collection, and it's important to note he did not use a single one of them for any of the murders that he pled guilty to. By his own admission, he killed all of his victims by strangulation. Oh, wait, so he changed his mind at some point and decided... Oh, because they said 1,000 days, right? And then he... Guess I changed his mind. He changed his mind. Presumably, Heuermann was a simple gun enthusiast with an interest in historical firearms, particularly from the World Wars. What's unnerving about the vault isn't necessarily what was in it, so much as how he treated it. Okay, so he had the 279 guns, right? He had handgun permits for 92 of them. Does that mean that he could have had permits? Because handgun permits, right? Does that mean he didn't need a permit, or did have a permit for the shotguns, the rifles? And also, what's the laws about historical guns? Because I know in Europe, historical weapons fall under, different rules in a lot of places. I think. Like I say, not really something I've looked into. Not that I mind guns. Don't mind guns at all. I quite enjoy shooting guns. One of the man's few friends, a fellow gun enthusiast named David Jimenez, revealed in an interview that Heuermann had told him, "You're one of only 4 people ever to be in this room." According to him, Ace Ellerup and the children weren't allowed inside. In addition to the vault and its weapons, the search warrant inventory included 27 computers. What the fuck? Sounds like my office. But there's lots of people. No, not lots of people. There's a few people with lots of computers because we work in media. 58 internal hard drives. Bro, as someone who stores an incredible amount of, recorded data, not even I have 58 internal hard drives. What the fuck's on them? 46 phones. I think I have 3, which 2 are burner phones for used. This is a very me-specific problem. And I don't know if I should say this, but when you sign up, you can only activate a certain number of YouTube channels per year or per however long on one number. So I've got 10 YouTube channels, several dead ones that, but to get them verified so you can do a video over 15 minutes long, you have to have a phone number. And my phone number is just that you've activated too many accounts. And I'm like, I know, I'm not trying to scam you. So I have 2 phones with other phone numbers that I just turn on to do activation and things. It's a very me problem. 9 Wi-Fi routers, 17 tablets, 42 USB drives, 36 SIM cards. What is going on? You had all of this stuff and you still did have a fucking VPN? What the fuck? Okay, frankly, having 46 phones and 9 Wi-Fi routers is more disturbing than having 279 weapons. What could he have possibly needed 9 routers for? Yeah, I've probably got maybe... It depends what you... Sorry, I know we're getting enormously into the specifics here, but I'm just interested in this, because I'm I got a lot of random technology. I think we have 3 internet lines coming into this place. Each one has a router, then they all go in, so that's 3. That's going into another router, which then goes into something called I think it's called a dream machine? Or is that the router? I don't know. My tech friend sets all this stuff up. But we got a lot of Wi-Fi routers. And so far, 0 murders. Other bizarre finds include a life-size doll encased in a wooden glass display case and a large framed portrait of a woman with a bruised and battered face. Ugh, why? They also confiscated a plethora of personal items like belts and cutting instruments, things like hair for future DNA analysis, and the book The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas, one of the fathers of psychological profiling. The document. Rex Heuermann killed 7 of his 8 known victims in the basement of his house at 105 First Avenue in Massapequa Park. I'll say their names again. Karen Vergata, 96. Valerie Mack, 2000. Jessica Taylor, 2003. Maureen Brainerd Brans, 2007. Melissa Barthelemy, 2009. Megan Waterman, 2010. Amber Costello, 2010. Sandra Costilla, who Heuermann officially admitted to murdering in 1993 despite not being charged, was not killed in the basement, but in the Dodge Ram Charger that he owned at the time. Investigators came to believe that Heuermann hung plastic sheeting from the basement ceiling to create what Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney would later call a staging area that would allow him to easily clean up after the murders. During their initial search, police noticed pushpins in the wall and damage to the basement ceiling, but didn't understand the significance. Yeah, me neither. What's that going to be? The forensic analysis of one of Heuermann's 58 hard drives changed that. When you delete a file on a computer, it's not erased per se. The data is stored in sectors on the hard drive, and the computer merely marks those sectors as unallocated. This lets the operating system know that in the future it can store new data there, but until it does, and thereby overwrites the previous data, whatever you deleted is still perfectly readable. Rex Heuermann apparently did not know this. A guy who owns 27 computers and you didn't know that? I'm not the most technically, I'm decent, but I'm not amazing. Even I know this! And you need to use one of those, I guess I'm a bit more data security conscious than most people, but I know that if I'm selling or giving away an old laptop or whatever, it's smart to do the thing where it writes over everything, right? I think this is even an option when you format disks. I've already brought up the Gilgo Beach serial killer's planning document multiple times. Not only does it illuminate the crimes he unsuccessfully tried to hide from the world, but it became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, destroying any hope he had of defending his not guilty plea. This planning document was a simple Microsoft Word file titled HK 2002 to 2004. Heuermann created the file in 2000, edited it numerous times through 2002, and then at some point, for reasons unknown, deleted it. Or at least he tried to. The document was typed out in all capital letters and organized into sections featuring 87 different entries. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll give you a representative sampling of those that became important for the prosecution. The first section was titled Problems. It included risks Heuermann wanted to mitigate. The first entry was DNA. The list also includes things like tire marks, bloodstains, footprints, and hair. The second section was titled Supplies. It included rope, tarps and tape, as well as items like police scanner and cleaning agents. The third section was titled DS. It was particularly important for the prosecution's case. Investigators believed that this stood for dump sites, the places where Heuermann believed he could safely dispose of his victims' bodies and the evidence. Only one entry read DS1, Mill Road. This was a major connection since the wooden area off Mill Road in Manorville, New York, is precisely where the partial remains of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor were found, victims the police had yet to successfully link to Heuermann. One poignant entry read vidcams on SS Parkway, or PKWY Parkway I assume, RT route 231 to exit 30 equals 10. Old. I don't know why you're writing like this. Is it so hard to type it out all fully, or do you really think the police are not going to be able to decode that as video cameras on, I guess, some sort of highway? State, super highway? I don't know. Parkway route 231 to exit 30 is 10 of them, and they're old. Okay. Southern State Parkway is a main thoroughfare. Oh, there you go, Southern State. SS Parkway. Perfect. On Long Island, and Route 231 to exit 30 is approximately the corridor near Massapequa Park. He appears to have been counting the cameras in the area. The fourth section was titled TRG. Believing it to stand for targets, prosecutors have reportedly pointed to this section because it contained the entry, small is good. Most of the victims Heuermann pleaded guilty to murdering were petite, many under 5 feet tall, roughly 150 centimeters. It even contains the entry, T1, Megan, ? Target? Dude, this is unpleasant. Since the document was never edited after 2002, when Megan Waterman was just 14 or 15 years old and living in Maine, this is almost certainly and horrifyingly referring to a different Megan that he was targeting. There were additional sections like pre-prep, prep, body prep, post-event, and things to remember. Right, yeah, because writing post-event... Again, if this was alone, it would be like, oh, no, it's just post-event. I was referring to something completely different. But when put all together, it's not good. I mean, it is good. Great, you're going to go to prison forever or maybe die. Perfect. The entries in this were especially damning, and after the murders of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla were added to Heuermann's charges in June 2024, the Suffolk County District Attorney specifically included entries here in a mass 32-page bail application to the judge that kept him in jail without bail, where he would stay until his guilty plea in April 2026. This is so recently. Do you think April, May? He's probably not been sentenced yet, has he? These things take a while. These sections paint the image of a man very deliberately planning out his horrific crimes in cold detail with complete detachment from the humanity of his victims. Pre-prep included vehicle inspection, setup stage, recon DS1, presumably in reference to dump site, locate DS2, weather report, recon vidcams. Prep included engage T1, presumably standing for target 1, his victim, holding area, build table, crossbar, hardpoint, recon pick zone for vidcams. Body prep included wash body inside and all cavities, remove ID marks, tattoos. Oh god. Remove head and hands. packaging for transport. Christ. This section was important because it matched precisely what had been done to many of the bodies, such as the mutilation of Jessica Taylor's tattoo. Post-event included change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics, have story set. Finally, the things to remember section was highlighted by prosecutors to show just how evil Heuermann was. They believed it's where he recorded lessons he learned from past murders that he could apply to future ones. It also featured multiple conspicuous spelling errors, but I'll let you read into yourself. Okay. Get sleep before hunt. Too tired, creates. It means creates. Creates. It's all in all caps, so his spell check is probably off, and then he mistype, and then it appears like that, it would be my guess. Hit harder. Too many hit, missing the plural S, to take down. Consider a hit to the face or neck next time for takedown. Use push pins to hang drop clothes from ceiling, not tape. Use heavy, H-E-V-E-Y, it's weird, rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. He spelled tightened wrong as well, like tight end. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime. Oh, fucking hell, man. While playtime might be the most disturbing thing on that list, it is, in my opinion. One very important thing is about the pushpins. It explained what police had seen on the walls and ceiling in the basement during the initial search. Pushpins for creating Heuermann's staging area. In the end, the document, along with additional DNA evidence, warranted a second search of the house in May 2024. The 4-day cycle. In just the last few weeks before putting this video together, new information has come to light about the Gilgo Beach murders. Asa Ellerup, Rex Heuermann's now ex-wife, and her 2 children, Victoria and Christopher, participated in a 4-part documentary series for Peacock. They were paid around $1 million, which has drawn considerable criticism, as well as the wrongful death lawsuit from Valerie Mack's son, Benjamin Torres, that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, this doesn't... I don't... So she's his ex-wife. This has got to be legally complicated. I mean, Peacock have definitely looked into that shit before paying them. But this feels like profiting off crimes. They're not your crimes, but you're very close. Either way, whatever the thing is, it's quite distasteful, isn't it? In my opinion. Arguably, the most important information in the documentary came from Alison T. Winter, a Long Island therapist who treated Heuermann while he was being held at the Suffolk County Correctional Facility in Riverhead. Heuermann's family signed a waiver of patient privacy, allowing her to reveal what the serial killer told her during their sessions. Wait, is that allowed? Wait, his family are allowed to waive his confidence? That seems like, I'm not trying to defend him, but his conversations with his therapist should be private. It doesn't matter. That should be private. That shouldn't be able to be waived by your family because you've been arrested. Heuermann, in my opinion, I guess that's different. I guess that's different to how I thought it was, but wow. Heuermann described his MO to Winter as a 4-day cycle he ran while his family took trips out of state. Day 1 was prep. He cleaned the basement and gathered supplies. He prepared the staging area. Day 2 was, in his words, time with the victim. According to Winter, this started with Heuermann being very kind to the woman. I'll skip details about what happened when he stopped being kind. Day 3 was, wait, what the fuck? Let me just reread this. Alison Winter, Long Island therapist who treated... okay, sorry. So she's his therapist while he's in county correctional. Okay, so that's why he's telling her about this. I thought, wait, maybe it's the therapist from before. And then you definitely need to tell the police, fuck that therapist-patient confidentiality or whatever it is. There must be a carve-out for... He's admitting to me that he murders people. But I still think that should be a privileged conversation, to be honest. But hey-ho. Day 3 was clean up. The therapist claimed he would dispose of everything he used so that there would be no evidence. Of course, it actually left a mountain of evidence, which makes his obsessive planning seem a bit pitiful. Finally, illustrating the cold calculation of it all, he left a 4th day for emergencies in case anything didn't go as planned. Alison Winter also pointed out another chilling aspect of Heuermann's process. Every time he disposed of a body near Gilgo Beach, he timed himself. From the moment he parked his car off the side of Ocean Parkway until the moment he had finished dumping the body of a woman with a family, friends, hopes and dreams in the marshy brush and was back in the driver's seat, he timed it. And each time, he tried to beat his previous record. Per Winter, the first time took him 2 minutes and 32 seconds. The last time took him 37 seconds. Ending these women's lives and discarding their bodies like garbage was just a game to him. out of options. For 1,000 days, Rex Heuermann claimed that he didn't do it. He didn't kill anyone. 1,000 days of, "I'm not guilty of these charges, Your Honor." 1,000 days during which his defense attorney told reporters that his client was in tears, proclaiming his innocence. But during those 1,000 days, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office was compiling what Ray Tierney would later describe as 120 terabytes of digital evidence and 7,000 pages of supporting documentation. Well, that was on those hard drives. That's a fuckload of data. That's a hell of a case. When Heuermann finally had to admit that he couldn't fight. The charges stack up. Now, if you'll recall, when Heuermann was first arraigned in July 2023, he was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder for the killings of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, 3 of the 4 women known as the Gilgo Four, whose bodies were found in the initial search off Ocean Parkway. He was also named publicly as the prime suspect in the death of the 4th, Maureen Baynard Barnes, with the understanding that charges would follow. DA Ray Tierney's strategy here was well thought out. The task force took Heuermann down suddenly and quietly with the goal, as Tierney later put it, to simultaneously arrest him and execute a whole bunch of search warrants, and if he was lulled to sleep, we would get additional evidence, and that's precisely what happened. On January the 16th, 2024, 6 months after the arrest, Heuermann was led back to Suffolk County Court in Riverhead and indicted for the murder of Maureen Baynard Barnes. A hair recovery from one of the leather belts that had been used to bind her body had been retested using new forensic techniques. It had matched Asa Ellerup, who incidentally was out of town when Maureen disappeared. Heuermann pleaded not guilty to the charge as well. On June the 6th, 2024, Heuermann was back in court for the 3rd time. This time, the indictment expanded the case beyond the Gilgo Four and slapped him with 2 additional second-degree murder charges for Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla, thanks to new DNA testing matching hairs found on or near the victims' bodies to Heuermann or his family members. Heuermann again pleaded not guilty, and his defense attorney told reporters that his client was, quote, "in a bad place." Yeah, no shit. He's in a really bad place. That place is jail. It's going to be prison very soon, because you murdered a bunch of people, you piece of shit. Finally, on December the 17th, 2024, the prosecution hit Heuermann with a 7th murder charge for Valerie Mack. This is also based on DNA. A hair found on her left wrist matched Asa Ellerup's mitochondrial DNA profile. A separate hair found inside the garbage bag that had contained her remains matched the DNA of Heuermann's daughter, Victoria. Of course, Ellerup, still circumstantial. He's so fucking cooked. Of course, Ellerup and the kids were out of town, plus Victoria was a small child at the time. The prosecution asserted household transference, meaning hairs from members of Heuermann's family were transferred onto his own clothing and tools, and ultimately the materials he used to dispose of the bodies and the bodies themselves. I mean, yeah, the prosecution asserted, what could the other possible explanation be? Rex Heuermann pleaded not guilty yet again. He was now, 18 months after his arrest, facing 10 charges, 3 counts of first-degree murder and 7 counts of intentional murder or second-degree murder. What's the difference? First-degree murder, isn't that intentional murder? I don't know, America's system works slightly differently than the one I'm used to. If you're curious why the prosecution added the first-degree charge to Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, it is merely a mathematical quirk of New York law. The state has no serial killer statute or anything like that automatically upgrades crimes when they are committed in a series. However, it does allow prosecutors to elevate a standard intentional murder charge, i.e. second-degree murder, to first-degree murder based on certain aggravating factors, one of which is that the defendant killed the victim and intentionally caused the death of 2 or more additional persons in separate incidents within a period of 24 months. I don't see the need of this. Why do we need a serial killer law? Surely it's just, we'll just prosecute you for life homicide sentences for every one of your victims. Can't we just do that? In other words, to get a first-degree murder charge, the prosecution has to show at least 3 murders were committed within a 2-year time frame. Simply put, Melissa Bartholomew, who disappeared in July 2009, Megan Waterman, who disappeared in June 2010, and Amber Costello, who disappeared in September 2010, met these criteria, while the other 4 victims fell outside of this window. I don't understand, so let's say a serial killer kills 3 people. That's 3 murder charges, 3 life sentences, which I think the judge can, this, also America has life without parole. It's like a whole order sentence in the UK. Like, you're never getting out. So that was it. Rex Heuermann was going to fight the charges. The trial was set for September 2026. Prosecutors planned to call more than 100 witnesses. The case had exploded into one of the single largest homicide prosecutions in the history of New York. The defense breaks. Rex Heuermann's lawyer was a prominent criminal defense attorney named Michael Brown. Despite Brown's high profile and renown in the Suffolk County legal community for his handling of several high-stakes criminal trials, he had actually been court-appointed as Heuermann's defense and made it clear to the press that he was not receiving any money from his client. Michael Brown and his team had a clear legal strategy throughout 2024 and 2025 that depended on two arguments. First, he claimed that the relatively new mitochondrial DNA testing that had been used to match heirs to Heuermann and his family was not reliable enough to be admitted as evidence in trial. Second, he argued that the 7 cases should be tried separately because trying them together would prejudice the jury. Oh, I see. Because if you do manage to get them split up, and then somehow the jury doesn't hear about this serial killer who's like literally on podcasts, like people will know about this. In September, you're cooked. You're fucking cooked. In September 2025, Judge Timothy Massey ruled against the defense on both motions. The DNA evidence would be admissible, and all 7 cases would be tried together. The trial was still a year away. Then in early 2026, the first cracks started to show. Heuermann attended a proffer session with the prosecution. This is a session in which the defendant can disclose information to the prosecuting attorneys with an agreement that it won't be used against them. Ray Tierney later revealed that the first thing he brought up was Karen Vergata, the 1996 murder, where the victim had been Fire Island Jane Doe until 2023. Tierney said, "There was a discussion with regard to Karen Vergata. Once that happened, we began to think that certainly a plea might occur." In the last weeks of 2026, Michael Brown approached the families of the victims through their lawyer, Gloria Allred. He asked them, formally, if they wanted to accept a plea or if they wanted to go to trial. They accepted the plea. A court date was set for Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. It's like literally just a month and a bit ago at the time of recording. The plea. The Suffolk County Courthouse in Riverhead, New York, lies about 60 miles east of New York City. On April the 8th, 2026, it was packed to capacity. Reporters clustered in the back rows. The family members of the 7 dead women filled the seats reserved for the victims. Asa Ellerup and her daughter sat in the last row. Why would you go? Rex Andrew Heuermann, now 62 years old, walked in wearing a black suit jacket and a white button-down shirt. He kept his eyes fixed forward, never looking at the gallery, not at his own family, nor the families of the women he'd slain. Suffolk County DA, Ray Tierney, walked him through the indictment, each victim at a time, with the same series of questions for each one. Did he murder this woman? Did he cause her death? Was the manner of death strangulation? Did you wrap her in burlap? Did you transport and dispose of her remains? For each victim, Rex Heuermann answered the same. Guilty. Sandra Costilla, killed in a Dodge Ram Charger, 1993, 28 years old. Karen Vergata last spoke to her father on Valentine's Day, killed April 96, 34. Valerie Mack, mother to a 6-year-old son, killed in the fall of 2000, 24 years old. Jessica Taylor, killed and mutilated in July 2003 when she was 20. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, a mother of 2 working to feed her kids, killed July 2007, 25 years old. Melissa Barthelemy, aspiring cosmetologist, killed 2009 when she was 24. Megan Waterman, who called her 3-year-old daughter every night, 2010, at 22 years old. And Lynn Costello, whose sisters never let the case rest, killed 2010, 27 years old. Family members in the gallery wept and held each other while Heuermann, seemingly emotionless, admitted to his crimes and pleaded guilty to 3 counts first-degree murder and 4 counts of intentional second-degree murder, as well as formally admitting to the murder of Karen Vergata. At the time of recording, formal sentencing has not yet occurred, with the date set for June 17, 2026. However, the DA's office recommended 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, followed by an additional consecutive sentence of 100 years to life. Rex Heuermann will almost certainly die in New York State Prison. This may have you wondering why he pleaded guilty in the first place. Indeed it does, Chris. After all, New York does not have the death penalty. Yeah, right? Okay. So, despite his plea, he will be receiving the maximum possible sentence anyway, and the answer has sparked some debate. First and foremost, Heuermann set a specific condition before finalizing the plea deal. He required a face-to-face therapy confession with his ex-wife, Asa Ellerup, and his family. He later told his therapist that it was something I needed to do face-to-face, and to be honest with each other, person-to-person, heart-to-heart. Mate, you do not have a heart, you fucking psycho. However, it was this session that gave his family the previously unheard-of information that they took to the documentary crew for their controversial $1 million payout. Additionally, Heuermann agreed to fully cooperate with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. This doesn't reduce his sentence, but it is a common arrangement for convicted serial killers who usually have narcissistic personalities and god complexes. The attention given to them by the behavioral psychologists maintains their sense of importance and feelings of being special, while law enforcement, hopefully, gets essential information to track down other serial killers faster. Yeah, as grim as it is to say, I do think that's good. Like, this guy can probably provide some pretty useful information on catching serial killers. Like, he's fucking pretty stereotypical. Not, boring. I don't want to say it's boring and some horrible crimes that he did, but pretty... I don't know. Oh, fuck this. I would like to point out a bit of irony here, though. If you recall, the initial search of Heuermann's house found he owned The Cases That Haunt Us, a book by FBI profiler John Douglas, one of the founding fathers of the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, which later evolved into the Behavioral Analysis Unit. In the deleted HK 2002-04 planning document on his hard drive, they also found citations pointing to specific page numbers in Mindhunter, another book by Douglas, and also a fantastic TV show. So basically, he was using John Douglas's work to try and evade John Douglas's successors at the FBI. He failed, and now we'll have to help them expand on the knowledge in those books with the very successors who outsmarted him. The families speak. After the plea, the victims' families tearfully addressed the press outside the Suffolk County Police Academy Auditorium in Brentwood. Elizabeth Baxkiel, the mother of Jessica Taylor, said, "I'm glad that this is over, as far as him pleading guilty. It took a big chunk of stress off me and my family. I accept the plea wholeheartedly." Melissa Cann, the sister of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, said, "This has been a long journey of hope that one day we would stand here and say her name with justice beside it. Today, that long, painful journey brings us to this moment." Gloria Allred, the famed victims' right attorney who represented the families, also spoke on their behalf to say, "Little did they know that the defendant, Rex Heuermann, did not care about their hopes and dreams, or that they had families and friends who loved them." End quote. After the family spoke, District Attorney Ray Tierney took the podium and said, "This defendant walked among us, play-acting as a normal suburban dad, when in reality, all along, he was obsessively targeting innocent women for death." End quote. Kevin Catalina, who had taken over as police commissioner in 2025, put it more bluntly. Today he was exposed for exactly what he is, a sadistic, soulless, murderous monster. As for Asa Ellerup, who finalized her divorce with Rex Heuermann in March 2025, she walked out of the courtroom following the plea with her attorney, Robert Macedonio. She read a brief statement. "My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. Their loss is immeasurable, and the focus should be on them at this time and moment. I ask you to give some privacy to my family as they navigate through this very difficult time." Since then, her attorney has claimed she is basically trapped inside her house that has become like a tourist attraction, with people passing by to take pictures and point. He has also maintained that despite the big paycheck from the documentary, the family is financially distraught. They're unemployable at this point. There is no income, he said. Ellerup's living arrangement has also drawn scrutiny since she revealed that she gutted and renovated the basement of the house where the murders were carried out and is now using it as a primary bedroom. That's very alleged, surely. Now there's me. I'm in this room, and I'm here because I do feel spiritual. I'm trying to say spiritually in my own way that I'm really sorry for what these victims went through. That is an extremely unusual reaction. Wow, how fucking bizarre. I just assumed that was like some tabloid bullshit, but wow. That's fucking weird, lady, in my opinion. Attorney Robert Macedonio has also insisted that neither Asa Ellerup nor her children knew anything about Rex Heuermann's crimes and were completely blindsided by his arrest. That's completely fair. This is the part specifically disputed by Benjamin Torres, Valerie Mack's son, who was just 6 years old when the Gilgo Beach Killer took her life. Not only does Torres' wrongful death lawsuit against Heuermann and his family claim that they are unjustly enriching themselves through the media exploitation of murders, i.e., getting around $1 million from Peacock for a documentary, it alleges that Acerella up and her daughter Victoria either knew about, willfully ignored, or helped conceal the crimes. Torres' attorney, John Ray, has publicly argued that they could not have been unaware of all that horror happening in a 1,300 square foot home. Which, I mean, he couldn't hide it from the police. He did a reasonable job, eventually getting caught, mostly police incompetence. Is why he got away with it. I say he did a reasonable job. He tried. He made an effort. I think he could have hidden this from his family. A semblance of justice. So that's where our story stands to date. Whether it requires a to-be-continued card is up to you. No, he goes to prison forever, that's it. We have our heroes, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, who along with former NYPD Chief Rodney Harrison, acting as the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, set up a real multi-agency task force that actually handled this case professionally. Geraldine Hart, the FBI agent who'd been kicked off the case by James Burke and came back as Suffolk County Police Commissioner in 2018, allowing the FBI back in. All of the detectives, investigators, police, lab tech, and other support staff with the FBI, New York State Police, and Suffolk County PD, who secretly and painstakingly built a case over 16 months with hundreds of subpoenas, despite the evidence that was lost by their predecessors. You also have the victims' family members who never gave up their quest for justice. But we also have our victims. James Burke, the Suffolk County Police Chief, who hindered the case, seemingly to keep his own crimes hidden, all before being taken down in a corruption scandal. Thomas Spotter, the Suffolk County District Attorney who covered for Burke and swept his crimes under the rug. Christopher McPartland, Spotter's anti-corruption prosecutor of all things, who assisted in the cover-up. And of course you have Rex Heuermann, a narcissist and coward who, despite being a hulking 6'4", preyed on petite, helpless women who couldn't fight back. And, completely opposite of feeling guilt or remorse after the fact, he coldly planned how to carry out better future murders. We also have our lingering questions. What happened to Asian Doe? Who is Asian Doe? Why were multiple bodies found off Ocean Parkway dumped by multiple killers? What happened to Shannon Gilbert? Did she die in a horrible accident, as Suffolk County PD assert, or was she killed by one of the apparently numerous murderers that frequent that part of Long Island? What happened in the house at 105 First Avenue, Massapequa Park, Long Island, New York? Did a woman and her 2 children live with a serial killer for nearly 3 decades and have no idea what was going on? Or, as Valerie Mack's son believes, were they somehow complicit? Most important of all, though, we have our victims. Sandra Costilla, Karen Vergata, Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello. However this story may continue, their chapter in it is thankfully finished. Their killer, whose name I won't repeat, is behind bars. Thank you for watching.